Chapter 1190. You're just an ant. How can you be a dog? Tianyong said coldly. It was as if the arrogant young man from the demon tribe was just a speck of dust on the ground. Sumashi was not the only one who was stunned. Even the purple-eyed young man who had been protecting Tianyong, Inwuhua, and the surrounding rogue cultivators and the manager of the mountain forest tower were stunned. In the next moment, the manager of the mountain forest tower reacted, and his face was filled with horror. He knew that Tianyong had always been indifferent and did not care about anything in the world. However, he did not expect that Tianyong would dare to act like this in front of Sumashi. As for the purple-eyed young man, the manager of the mountain forest tower automatically ignored him. After all, the purple-eyed young man was the second son of Blood Spring Mountain. In terms of arrogance, he was on par with Sumashi. Was he speaking up for Tianyong? How could it be? It was just two young masters who were at odds. Tianyong should just stay quiet and be a mute. There was no need to interrupt. In the next moment, Sumashi looked over. The manager of the mountain forest tower suddenly felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. His whole body was cold, and he unconsciously took a few steps back to distance himself from Tianyong. He was doomed. He was doomed. The manager of the mountain forest tower thought to himself. In the next moment, Sumashi also spoke. Ant, be a dog? Sumashi's calm voice rang out. However, his expression was even more ferocious and crazy. Bastard, do you know who you were talking to? Sumashi roared. In the next moment, the whip in his hand suddenly burned with black ghost flame, and he whipped it toward Tianyong. If this whip hit, Wu Zun, who was of the LV5 realm, would definitely die. Oh no! At this moment, the purple-eyed young man, Inwuhua's face changed, and he hurriedly attacked. In the next moment, Tianyong laughed lightly and attacked. This time, Tianyong did not hold back like he did with the purple-eyed young man, since he was already an envoy of the illusory god palace. Then, he had to act like an envoy. A trash young master dared to be arrogant in front of an envoy? He attacked with his palm. The heaven-devouring seal instantly formed, and the illusion devil ancient tome shone brightly. Demonic chi immediately surrounded the black vortex. Moreover, it was accompanied by a strong ghost chi, and it directly bombarded Sumashi's body. Boom! With a loud bang, Sumashi was instantly sent flying. Blood, mixed with pieces of his internal organs, spurted out crazily. Not only his ribs, but all the bones in his body were directly smashed into pieces by Tianyong's palm. He had completely turned into a pile of mud. Do you think an ant is qualified to speak? Tianyong said indifferently. His eyes were filled with disdain from the bottom of his heart. It was as if his soul was much more noble than Sumashi, the young master of the city governor's mansion. The manager of the mountain forest tower was stunned. This seemingly ordinary fifth stage Wu Zun was actually this strong? Wu Zun, who was at LV6 of the martial arts realm, was sent flying with a single palm strike? Could it be that he was hiding his strength? However, after guessing, the manager of the mountain forest tower felt cold all over. Even his thoughts were almost frozen. Although Sumashi was arrogant, he was, after all, the young master of the city governor's mansion. At the entrance of the city governor's mansion, a nameless rogue cultivator from the demon tribe had beaten up the young master of the city governor's mansion. He was afraid that not only this young man would definitely die, even they were likely to be implicated. Lord Messenger, why did you have to do this? Seeing this, the purple-eyed young man, Inwuhua, could only helplessly smile bitterly. If he had done this, Sumashi might not have been harmed. However, Sumashi was so stupid to bring all his hatred onto the Lord Messenger of the illusory god palace. If he did not die, who would? I can handle this matter cleanly. Can I? At this moment, Tianyong said lightly. His words did not show any respect to the purple-eyed young man at all. Hearing this, the purple-eyed young man was at a loss for words. Then he smiled bitterly. All right. The Lord Messenger of the illusory god palace had seriously injured the young master of the city governor's mansion in front of him. What was this? To the city governor's mansion, how could a young master and a Lord Messenger of the illusory god palace be compared? Even if Tianyong killed all the sons of the city governor in front of him, the city governor might not say anything. After all, to the demon tribe, sons were only things that could be obtained when they were born. They were not much stronger than a sage-to-be weapon. However, there will be more or less some trouble in the future, the purple-eyed young man said helplessly. Then, he took out a communication token and sent a message to Elder Xuechuan Mountain in the city governor's mansion. No matter what, he had to let Elder Xuechuan know about this matter. What's the situation? However, just as the purple-eyed young man sent the message, a cold snort sounded from the city governor's mansion. In the next moment, a man who looked 80% similar to Sumashi, but was younger than Sumashi, strode out of the door. Wu Zun's aura of the level 8 realm surrounded him. Second, brother, seeing the man coming, Sumashi, who was on his last breath, opened his mouth. All his bones were broken, and even his internal organs were damaged. Brother, how did you become like this? The man turned his head and saw Sumashi, who had been sent flying by Tianyang like a dead dog. Sumashi did not even have much demonic chi left. Tianyang's devouring sky seal had even swallowed demonic chi and given it to the sky sword. As such, Sumashi had not discovered it. His demonic chi origin had long been broken. He just thought that the demonic chi had been sucked dry. It's you. However, after checking, the man found the person who had caused Sumashi to be severely injured. A pair of furious eyes stared at Tianyang. In the next moment, he stepped out. A long thorn stabbed towards Tianyang. Get lost, Tianyang said indifferently. His lips opened slightly, and a syllable flew out. Instantly, the second young master of the city governor's mansion was the strongest genius in this generation of the city governor's mansion. Wu Zun was a level 8 realm expert. He was directly sent flying by Tianyang's voice. Fresh blood spurted out of his mouth, and his ribs were all broken. He was not much better off than his brother. Seeing this, all the spectating rogue cultivators, including the manager of the Mountain Forest Tower, were completely stunned. Exactly what had happened? Had the world gone crazy? As for the purple-eyed youth, he sighed. It was as expected. Where is the Lord Messenger? In the next moment, two more figures flew out of the city governor's mansion. One was slightly younger, Wu Zun level 9 realm, the third elder of Bloodspring Mountain. The other was a middle-aged strong man, Wu Zun Peak, the city governor of Ancient U City. Seeing the city governor appear, everyone was shocked. These two people had actually come. Didn't that mean that Tianyang? What's the situation? The city governor of Ancient U City instantly discovered the miserable state of his two sons. His tanned face instantly became ferocious and furious. At this moment, the third elder of Blood Spring Mountain spoke. Your two sons have offended the Lord Messenger of the Palace of the Illusory Gods. Hearing this, the city governor of Ancient U City's face changed, and he hurriedly looked at Tianyang. It was as if he did not dare to recognize him. After staring for a while, he walked forward and lowered his head, together with the third elder of Blood Spring Mountain. Greetings to the Lord Messenger of the Palace of the Illusory Gods. The third elder of Blood Spring Mountain was extremely respectful. Chapter 1191. Greetings, Lord Envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God. The two of them bowed in unison as if they had rehearsed this for a long time. Even the angle of their bows was exactly the same. One of them was the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain. Although he was useless in everyone's eyes, he was still a supreme expert, Wu Zun Realm Level 9. With a flip of his hand, he could kill everyone here. The other was the city lord of the Ancient U City, the one who controlled the lives of millions of demons in the city, Wu Zun. His battle strength was terrifying. Both of them were lofty figures looking down at the crowd. Even at the gathering, they were still considered to be at the top among the geniuses with relatively high statuses. Even the most outstanding second son, who was beaten up by Tianyang, didn't dare to say anything. They actually bowed in front of a young man. What was going on? Tianyang nodded indifferently. He didn't ask the two of them to get up, nor did he ask them to continue bowing. The two of them didn't know whether to get up or continue bowing. It was very awkward. However, the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain was smarter. He didn't stand up immediately and spoke to Tianyang. Lord Envoy, the wind is strong here. Why don't we talk inside? Hearing this, Tianyang nodded indifferently. The two of them heaved a sigh of relief and stood up to lead the way for Tianyang. From start to finish, they didn't even look at the two young masters of the ancient Yu city who had been beaten up like dogs. Seeing this, the second young master of the city, Lord Manor, who thought that the city lord of the ancient Yu city would be furious, was stunned. What was going on? He was the strongest genius of the ancient Yu city, Lord Manor. Logically speaking, even if the city lord didn't care, he should have said a few words. Why did he only care about the person who had beaten him up and not care about him? Even if he's a disciple of a peak half-step demon saint, he shouldn't be like this. The second young master of the city, Lord Manor, was confused. However, he forced himself to eat a healing pill and quickly recovered. Then he picked up the first young master of the city lord's mansion, who had been beaten into a pulp and had completely fainted, and followed him. Palace of the Illusory God. Where is it from? I wonder why Lord Envoy of the Illusory God Palace has come this time. On the way, the ancient Nether City's city lord seemed to have completely forgotten about what had happened as he spoke respectfully. Hearing this, Tianyang glanced at the city lord of ancient Yu city, and a trace of shock flashed through his heart. This ancient Nether City's city lord's son was about to be killed, and he was still so calm? It seemed that he was a ruthless person. However, Tianyang's face did not reveal the slightest bit of it. Instead, he said indifferently, I believe that the Illusory God Palace has already told you my purpose for coming here. How could you not know? Tianyang was slightly impatient. At the same time, the arrogance in his tone was not restrained in the slightest. Although the Palace of the Illusory God Palace existed on the demon planet, they did not have much activity. Hence, most of the demon race did not know that such a huge force like the Palace of the Illusory God existed on the demon planet. Hence, even if Tianyang used the power of his primordial spirit to scan the entire ancient Nether City, he did not gain much. However, from the reactions of the purple-eyed Yuthine Wuhua and the old servant Ingu from the Blood Spring Mountain, it could be seen that the Palace of the Illusory God Palace was very powerful. Just how powerful was the Palace of the Illusory God on the demon planet? Tianyang directly used the Palace of the ancient Nether God as an example of the nine-tailed fox clan. He was as arrogant as he could be and as disdainful as he could be. As expected, Tianyang's guess was absolutely correct. Seeing Tianyang's expression, the city lord of ancient Yu city was instantly relieved. Although the envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God had come at the wrong time and did not seem too reliable, he was definitely real. If he was fake, then under the pressure of the city lord of ancient Yu city, he would definitely reveal some clues. He also wouldn't be so arrogant as to offend the Blood Spring Mountain and ancient Yu city. He would even beat up the two sons of the city lord in front of the city lord manor. He was so arrogant even when speaking to the city lord of ancient Yu city. It was obvious that this was the envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God. My apologies, Lord Envoy. My head was muddled and I forgot. The city lord of ancient Yu city slapped his head and smiled. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded his head. Following this, they arrived at the city lord manor where the genius banquet was being held. Many geniuses had already entered the genius banquet. They were all geniuses from large families, sects, and factions like the Mountain Forest Tower. The manager of the Mountain Forest Tower, who had led Tianyang to the genius banquet, also entered. When he saw Tianyang being led in by two experts, his face was filled with disbelief. This was too shocking. Just then, Tianyang had attacked and beaten up the two young masters of the city lord manor. Now, the city lord of ancient Yu city had brought him to the genius banquet. Instantly, the manager of the Mountain Forest Tower felt like all his fear and worry was a joke. If he had the strength, why would he care about such things? Lord Envoy, should I introduce you to the families and sects of ancient Yu city? The city lord of the ancient Yu city said respectfully to the leader of the various families. Hearing this, Tianyang's expression did not change as he shook his head. I came to ancient Yu city to complete a mission, not to form a good relationship with ancient Yu city. I will leave after completing the mission from the palace of the illusory god. What's the point of knowing these people? Tianyong said without any trace of politeness. Hearing this, the city lord of ancient Yu City sighed. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god was a super existence that might not be seen even once in 800 years. If this person was interested in someone in ancient Yu City, then ancient Yu City would be protected by the palace of the illusory god in the future. However, this envoy of the palace of the illusory god seemed to be obsessed with the demonic Tao and didn't care about these girls, so the city lord of ancient Yu City's plan fell through. Then, Lord Envoy, please have a seat. I'll excuse myself for a moment. The city lord of ancient Yu City smiled. After letting Tianyong sit down, he went to talk to the leaders of the various forces in ancient Yu City. Those leaders didn't know who Tianyong was, so they didn't dare to talk to Tianyong. Tianyong left some space for them to talk. I heard that the head disciple of the Blood Spring Mountain became a disciple of a mysterious expert from the demon planet? Tianyong asked. In order to get information about the Black Nethersoul Hell, he had to talk to this person. Hearing this, the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain was stunned. He didn't think that the Lord Envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God would talk to him. Then, he hurriedly said with a proud expression, "That's right. My Blood Spring Mountain's head disciple was recently taken in by a mysterious and powerful peak demonic sovereign from the demon planet. I heard that the demonic sovereign is infinitely close to becoming a half-saint. I wonder if Lord Envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God has heard of him. That demonic sovereign's name is the Great Lord of Heaven." The third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain smiled. Hearing this, Tianyong was stunned. Chapter 1192. The Great Lord of Heaven. Tianyong never expected that he had thought of countless plans and simulated hundreds of responses just to lead the topic to the Great Lord of Heaven. He had hit the bullseye as soon as he opened his mouth. The eldest disciple of Blood Spring Mountain, the purple-eyed youth Enwu's elder brother's mysterious master, was actually the person Tianyong had been looking for, the Great Lord of Heaven. I didn't expect this. I really didn't expect this. Tianyong's eyes flashed with a strange light. He had just arrived, but he had already received news about the Great Lord of Heaven. It had to be said that the heavens were really helping him. If he had to search for the Great Lord of Heaven alone, the demonic star was so huge that it was almost on par with the Tianshao Great World, although it was much smaller than the Xintian Great World. Searching for news about a person in such a big world, even if that person was a peak demon venerable, was tantamount to finding a needle in a haystack. Even if he was mistaken for the high status of an emissary of the illusory shrine, it only lowered the difficulty a little. By the time Tianyong found him, Shun Tian Wuzun's corpse might have already turned cold. At that time, Tianyong would not have to do it himself, as the All-Heaven Sword would stab Tianyong to death. But now, he had searched high and low for it, only to find it by chance. "Sir Emissary, are you interested in the Great Lord of Heaven?" Because Tianyong was so excited, the appearance of the illusory fiend Ancient Book changed slightly. This slight change was also noticed by the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain. He revealed a surprised expression. Hearing this, Tianyong suddenly woke up and realized that they were still in the middle of a conversation. He had originally planned to search for clues about the Great Lord of Heaven for a few months, but now it had been delivered directly to his hands. Now, he just wanted to see if he could use this clue to get more information. That's right. Since he had been seen through, Tianyong simply admitted it. "I'm here to temporarily suspend a mission that I'm currently undertaking. That mission requires the help of Wuzun, who is at the pinnacle of ancient Yu City. Originally, I wanted to borrow the help of the city lord of ancient Yu City, but if the Great Lord of Heaven is willing to help, then that would be perfect," Tianyong said. Hearing this, Zhuoquanchen was slightly stunned. He did not expect things to be so coincidental. However, it was quite normal. According to what the city lord of ancient Nether City had said before, the illusory God Palace's response speed was completely different from the illusory God Palace's status as the overlord of the demonic planet. At that time, ancient Yu City's city lord and Blood Spring Mountain's third elder both had their suspicions. They thought that the news had been leaked, leading to the appearance of a daring swindler. It was only a moment ago that his identity was confirmed. Only now did he know why it was so fast. Since he was nearby, he stopped the mission and came over to complete a new mission. Then, he would look for a helper. All of a sudden, everything seemed to make sense. Tianyang did not expect that his casual lie would dispel the doubts of Blood Spring Mountain's third elder and ancient Nether City City Lord. Now, the two of them firmly believed that Tianyang was the envoy of the illusory God Palace. So, Lord Envoy wants to invite the great Lord of Heaven. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder asked curiously. Hearing this, Tianyang nodded. That mission is extremely dangerous. If I were to act alone, I would probably fail many times. If we have the help of a peak martial saint, the success rate will increase a bit. The ancient Nether City City Lord will only have a very small chance of success. However, if it is the demon Venerable Huatian, it will be different. The name of the great Lord of Heaven is something that even I have heard of in the illusory God Palace. Tianyang said faintly. Although he had revealed a strange expression before, he still had to maintain the demeanor of an expert. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder did not have any doubts. In his eyes, the great Lord of Heaven was the strongest existence in the entire demon planet aside from the half-step demon saint. It was normal for the illusory God Palace to know about him. However, this Lord Envoy was really domineering. Now that he was in the territory of the ancient Nether City City Lord, he directly said that the ancient Nether City City Lord was no good. He almost said that the ancient Nether City City Lord was a piece of trash. Since Lord Envoy wants to know, then I'll tell you everything I know. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder smiled respectfully. However, the great Lord of Heaven is a lone wolf and is very mysterious. He is often not on the demon planet, so I don't know where he is now. Hearing this, Tianyang pretended not to know and asked, It's fine. You just need to tell me about him. All right then. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder nodded slightly. He was also a little surprised. What was the mission of the Lord Envoy of the illusory God Palace? Although the ancient Nether City City Lord was not the strongest among Wuzun, his strength was definitely not weak. However, in the eyes of the Lord Envoy of the illusory God Palace, he was just so. He even needed the help of someone like the great Lord of Heaven. Could it be the remains of a demon saint? Blood Spring Mountain's third elder guessed in his heart and then said, The great Lord of Heaven is not often on the demon planet. The reason why he took in our Blood Spring Mountain's first disciple as a registered disciple is because he happened to come to our Blood Spring Mountain. The place where the great Lord of Heaven stays the most is outside the demon planet, in a prison called the Black Nether Soul Prison. Black Nether Soul Prison. Hearing this, Tianyang's heart shook. However, the illusory demon ancient book activated and covered up Tianyang's excitement. The Black Nether Soul Prison is from the demon planet. In the sky, in the starry sky, about 10 million miles away from the palace, Tianyang said. Hearing this, Blood Spring Mountain's third elder's eyes widened. My lord, how did you know? The Black Nether Soul Prison can't be seen. Only 2 words replied to Blood Spring Mountain's third elder. Ha! Hearing this, Blood Spring Mountain's third elder's face turned red. He was only Wuzun Realm Level 9 and naturally could not see. However, who was Tianyang? The Lord Envoy of the illusory God Palace. His strength was unfathomable, and even the City Lord of ancient Nether City did not take him seriously. Even if he could not see it, did it mean that the Lord Envoy of the illusory God Palace could not see it? It's the palace in the starry sky. The great Lord of Heaven stays there often to refine the power of the starry sky and extract the essence of various experts from various worlds to cultivate a powerful demonic technique. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder's eyes flashed with envy as he spoke. Refining humans as nourishment for the demonic technique and building it in the starry sky was something that countless demons dreamed of. So, the great Lord of Heaven is there now. Tianyang asked. That's right. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder nodded and handed over a jade slip. This is the way to enter the Black Nether Soul Prison, as well as the map of the Black Nether Soul Prison. I hope that my Lord Emissary will not forget me after completing the mission. Blood Spring Mountain's third elder smiled respectfully. The reason why he said so much was because of the last sentence. However, the Black Nether Soul prison is filled with traps, and the great Lord of Heaven himself does not like to entertain guests, Blood Spring Mountain's third elder added, as if he was afraid of offending the great Lord of Heaven. It's fine. Tianyong smiled. I have my own plans. Filled with traps? Once he got the information, how many traps could there be? Did not like to entertain guests? No problem. Chapter 1193. The map of the Black Underworld Soul Prison was now in his hands. From the words of the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain, Tianyong could deduce the cultivation base of the great Lord of Heaven. 30,000 years ago, the strength displayed by the great Lord of Heaven in his battle with Shuntian Wuzuan was on par with the cultivation base of Bai Pingyu and Huang Long of the True Dragon Sacred Domain. Previously, he had peeked into the Black Nether Soul Prison, and the aura demon Venerable Hua Tian had displayed was no weaker than Xianyuan Kong, Jin Zhan, and Qiying Tian's combined strength. Even the half-saint of the Heavenly Dragon Clan, Bai Zhizhu, who was crushed by Tianyong, was probably on par with him. However, the cultivation base of the great Lord of Heaven was still at the peak of the 9th tier of Wuzun Realm. The peak of Wuzun Realm. In other words, the great Lord of Heaven, at the peak of Wuzun Realm, is already on par with a half-saint, and this is the aura he casually exudes. This guy might have already stepped into the realm of dual Saint Dao, or even 3 Saint Dao. Tianyong's eyes flashed with brilliance as thoughts flashed through his mind. If a genius with 3 Saint Dao was placed in the Xintian Great World, it would be enough to shock the entire world. Even Tianyong was wary of exposing 3 Saint Dao, so he had used the myriad Saint Dao in his last attack. If not, the dragons of the True Dragon Sacred Domain would know about the 3 Saint Dao, or other forces would know that Tianyong had 3 Saint Dao. If that happened, Tianyong would not be able to live in peace. However, the great Lord of Heaven was different. The strongest person on the Demona planet was only a half-step demon saint, which was equivalent to a half-saint at the peak. In other words, if the great Lord of Heaven really had 3 Saint Dao, the so-called strongest half-step demon saint was nothing to him. No wonder Xintian Wuzuan hasn't shown any signs of escaping. All Heaven's sword wouldn't dare to let me take revenge for Xintian Wuzuan. So, it's because the great Lord of Heaven is terrifyingly powerful, Tianyong muttered to himself. On the surface, he calmly accepted the jade slip and kept it in his interspatial bag. If the invitation is successful, you will naturally get your share of the treasures. Tianyong said indifferently. Hearing this, the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain was overjoyed. At this moment, the city lord of the ancient Nether City had also returned. Seeing the Blood Spring Mountain's third elder and Tianyong chatting happily, the ancient City's city lord's expression changed slightly. The emissary of the illusory god palace came because of him, but now Xuechuan Mountain was trying to get close to him. How could this be? Lord Emissary, now that the genius banquet is almost over, shouldn't we talk about proper matters? The city lord of the ancient Nether City said. In reality, more than half of the factions in the ancient Nether City had yet to be recruited. But for the illusory god palace, what were these factions? Of course, the illusory god palace was the most important. Sure. Tianyong lightly nodded his head and stood up. In his heart, he was thinking about how to get out of this situation. It's fine if he just flicked his sleeves and left. However, if the city lord of the ancient Nether City became suspicious, then it would be troublesome. All right, Lord Emissary, this way, please. Hearing this, the city lord of the ancient Nether City revealed a trace of joy. He looked at the Blood Spring Mountain's third elder proudly and prepared to lead Tianyong into the depths of the city lord manor. The Blood Spring Mountain's third elder didn't back down and glared back at the city lord of the ancient Nether City. Lord Emissary, you owe me a small favor. You're just a city lord who only has a business relationship with me. Who do you think you are? When Lord Emissary completes his mission, it's hard to say if Lord Emissary will even remember you. Report. At this moment, a loud roar came from outside the door. Hearing this, All the geniuses in the City Lord Manor were stunned. Some of them revealed a trace of frown. Why was the servant of the City Lord Manor so insensible? Why did he roar so loudly? In the next moment, the servant's roar shocked the entire City Lord Manor. The Lord Emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God has arrived. The servant shouted at the top of his lungs. Hearing this, the entire City Lord Manor went into an uproar. Those who were able to participate in this banquet all had a high status in the ancient Nether City. Naturally, they also had the means to know what kind of colossus the Palace of the Illusory God was. Normally, they didn't even have the chance to hear this name, much less see the emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God himself. Instantly, all the family heads stood up and rushed out of the door. The geniuses also stood up and raised their heads to look at the Lord Emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God. However, there were two people in the crowd who froze. The Bloodspring Mountain's third elder and the ancient Nether City's City Lord. What is going on? The City Lord of the ancient Nether City glanced at Tianyang in disbelief. Wasn't the Lord Emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God here? Who was the Lord Emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God that the servant reported? Tianyang was also a bit shocked. The Palace of the Illusory God was this efficient? He hadn't even left yet, but the main character had already arrived. However, with the illusory demon ancient book covering him up, Tianyang's expression didn't change at all. He calmly said, "Go out and see what's going on." The Palace of the Illusory God has been silent for many years. Where did this rascal come from and dares to impersonate them? Tianyang said indifferently. That look of not putting the person in his eyes made the City Lord of the ancient Nether City calm down. That's right. The Lord Emissary of the Palace of the Illusory God should be like this. Cold, arrogant, and overbearing. How could it be the person who came to the City Lord Manor? City Lord of the ancient Nether City. Why aren't you coming out to see me? At this moment, an angry roar came from outside the door. In the next instant, a terrifying aura of the illusory demon covered the entire City Lord Manor like a fog. The geniuses that were looking up all trembled, and their faces paled as if they had seen something terrifying. As for the City Lord of the ancient Nether City, his expression didn't change. Tianyang was protected by the illusory demon ancient book. Even if the saint realm of the illusory demon race came, they wouldn't be able to do anything to Tianyang. Just as the City Lord of the ancient Nether City was about to walk out, a figure appeared in the main hall of the City Lord Manor. Still holding a banquet, this figure was tall and thin, and he was covered in a black robe. It was impossible to see his face, but the aura of Wu Zun on his body couldn't be ignored. Hurry up and hand over the flowing illusory spring. I don't want to waste time. The black-robed person urged coldly. Hearing this, the City Lord of the ancient Nether City's heart shook. The flowing illusory spring. How did this impostor know about the contents of this secret transaction? At this moment, the black-robed person glanced at the City Lord of the ancient Nether City and immediately noticed Tianyang. Immediately, a suspicious smile appeared on his face. Why do you have the aura of the illusory demon ancient book on your body? Illusory demon ancient book? These words were like lightning that struck the City Lord of the ancient Nether City's heart. In the next instant, before the City Lord of the ancient Nether City could react, Tianyang laughed and used the illusory demon ancient book to change his appearance. My apologies. Chapter 1194. I'm sorry. I'm the fake one. Tianyang chuckled, and in the next moment, a black sword appeared in his hand. Not good. At this moment, the Bloodspring Mountain's third elder reacted. If Tianyang was a fake, then why did he come here to deceive the City Lord? Until now, Tianyang hadn't deceived anyone other than the information about the great lore of heaven. Fake! Fake! Hearing this, the City Lord of ancient Nether City was completely stunned and fell into chaos. The one who had the demeanor of an expert and was domineering was a fake. The one who was arrogant and egotistical was the real deal. Previously, he had trusted the envoy of the Palace of the Illusory God so much. Even when the real envoy came, he still trusted this person. Even when Tianyong didn't reveal his identity, he still tried to speak up for him. In the end, this guy was really a fake bastard. Thinking that he had been fooled for so long, the city lord of ancient Nether City revealed a trace of rage and pounced towards Tianyong. Wu Zun's peak ninth stage aura instantly exploded. Scram! Tianyong waved his hand, and instantly, the city lord of ancient Nether City spat out a mouthful of blood and was sent flying by this slap. What kind of strength is this? Seeing this, the Blood Spring Mountain's third elder was stunned, sending the city lord of ancient Nether City flying with a slap. This strength, even if it was weaker than the great Lord of Heaven, the real envoy of the palace of the illusory god, it shouldn't be much weaker. Why did he disguise himself as an envoy of the palace of the illusory god and come to ancient Nether City to deceive people? Who are you? The palace of the illusory god's envoy's face also darkened as he stared at Tianyong with a trace of fear. Even he had to take this strength seriously. However, he didn't remember the palace of the illusory god having such an enemy. You don't know who I am? Hearing this, Tianyong was stunned, and then the handsome face that was disguised by the illusory demon ancient book suddenly became ferocious. In the next moment, Tianyong's left cheek suddenly split open with a terrifying wound. Ha ha ha! How could the dignified Lord Envoy of the illusory god palace know who an ant like me is? Tianyong laughed crazily. His whole face was distorted. He opened his eyes wide and stared at the emissary of the illusory god palace. His finger pointed at the wound. 300 years ago, your people from the palace of the illusory god killed all 365 members of my Sioux family with a wave of their hands. As for me, I was lucky enough to survive, but I was also left with a scar that would accompany me for the rest of my life. Tianyong roared crazily. The aura on his body fluctuated continuously, as if his emotions were very unstable. A terrifying killing intent was released from Tianyong's body. The face of the illusory god palace's envoy immediately became serious. A deep killing intent flashed in the depths of his eyes. It seemed that this person really had an irreconcilable enmity with the palace of the illusory god. That's right. The palace of the illusory god dominates the demon planet. The illusory god palace of the illusory demon alliance in the demon world. How could it care about a small family that doesn't even have a heavenly completion stage expert? I'm afraid that the demon lord of the palace of the illusory god palace attacked back then because he was in a bad mood. Heavenly Sun laughed hysterically, completely at odds with his previous indifferent and domineering attitude towards all living beings in the world. Seeing this, the hearts of the third elder of the Blood Spring Mountain and the city master of the ancient U City trembled. This was a madman, a complete madman. However, you didn't expect that the son of a herdsman who didn't even reach the heavenly completion stage would become a peak Wu Zun 300 years later. From today onwards, the name Su Tian Shao will become the nightmare of all the people of the palace of the illusory god on the demon planet. Let's start with you. Tianyong smiled sinisterly. In the next moment, he used the heavens' expanse 9 changes. The illusory demon ancient book blazed with light, and demon chi surrounded it. In the blink of an eye, Tianyong arrived in front of the palace of the illusory god's emissary and slashed at him with his sword. Demon chi at the peak of Wu Zun's level burst out. The illusory demon ancient book was a creation of the saint stage. It couldn't be easier to imitate a peak LV9 Wu Zun. Tianyong could rival a peak half-saint. Although his cultivation was only at the LV9 Wu Zun, imitating a peak Wu Zun was a bit degrading. Therefore, the emissary of the palace of the illusory god didn't doubt the authenticity of Tianyong's cultivation. Instead, he was shocked that Tianyong could unleash such a terrifying attack with his peak Wu Zun cultivation. Su Tianshao. However, the emissary of the palace of the illusory god's expression was still calm. I didn't expect that a small family that was casually annihilated by an elder of the palace of the illusory god 300 years ago would have someone like you. If you were given a few more years to become a half-step demon saint, perhaps the palace of the illusory god wouldn't be able to do anything to you. But now a peak demon saint? The emissary of the palace of the illusory god sneered. In the next moment, his figure flashed, and he threw a punch at Tianyang. I've killed quite a few myself. Boom, boom, boom. In the blink of an eye, the two peak demon saints staged demon cheese collided. Each of them was much stronger than the city lord of ancient City at his peak. Fist light and sword light flashed. Every time the light flashed, the city lord's mansion would tremble. Soon, the entire city lord's mansion collapsed. Most of the destruction was caused by Tianyang's sword light. The emissary of the palace of the illusory god was indeed from the palace of the illusory god. Almost all of his attacks were illusions. Unfortunately, Tianyang had the illusory demon ancient book to protect him. He also had the primordial spirit that was at the peak of Wu Zun's primordial spirit. A mere peak Wu Zun illusory demon wanted to defeat him with illusions. It was almost impossible. Damn it, how can this guy who came out of nowhere be so strong? The emissary of the palace of the illusory god became more and more shocked as he fought. His face gradually darkened as he roared at the city lord of ancient City. Hurry up and give me the flowing, illusory spring. He was afraid that he wouldn't be able to do anything to Tianyang by himself. Therefore, he could only rely on the power of the treasure. The flowing, illusory spring was a treasure that even the palace of the illusory god would send people to trade. It would be a waste for it to fall into the hands of the city lord of ancient City. If it fell into the hands of the emissary of the palace of the illusory god, even if a half-step demon saint came, the emissary of the palace of the illusory god was confident that he could defeat him. Yes, the city lord of ancient City trembled and hurriedly attacked. A stream of light shot toward the emissary of the palace of the illusory god. Seeing this, the emissary of the palace of the illusory god revealed a sinister smile. The flowing illusory spring was in his hands. This Su Tianxiao was definitely going to die. Are you treating me as if I don't exist? At this moment, a large hand suddenly appeared between the flowing illusory spring and the emissary of the palace of the illusory god. The next moment, the large hand clenched and forcefully grabbed the flowing illusory spring and put it into the interspatial bag. Seeing this, the palace of the illusory god's pupils shrank. He roared and charged toward Tianyang. You dare! At this moment, Tianyang smiled slightly and formed a seal with his hands. The expression on his face became more vivid. Trash of the palace of the illusory god die. Chapter 1195. Ancient Blood Seal. Tianyang shouted, and suddenly, the majestic demonic energy gathered, turning into a blood-red seal in front of Tianyang, and fiercely rushed toward the messenger of the illusory god palace. Ancient Blood Seal. Ancient magical power. Tianyang obtained it from killing Su Mo, the Blood Demon King, who was at the peak of the 5th level of the Heaven Ascension realm in the blizzard country of Tianxiao Great World. At that time, Su Mo had used a variant of the Ancient Blood Seal, the Ancient Blood Demon Seal. Moreover, he had only learned a little. As for Tianyang, although he had obtained the cultivation method from Su Mo's mind, he was already in the 9th level of the Wu Zun realm. His cultivation of the Ancient Blood Seal was countless times better than Su Mo's. When this move of the Ancient Blood Seal was displayed, the terrible power suddenly bloomed. Even a messenger of the illusory god palace could not help but be shocked. Ancient Blood Seal. This is an ancient magical power that the Blood Demon clan will never pass to outsiders. The messenger of the illusory god palace roared in his heart, and his face showed an incredulous look. Why did Tianyang have such an ancient magical power? Even within the Blood Demon clan, such a remarkable ability was not something that could be obtained so easily. Could it be that the small family that was destroyed by a predecessor of the illusory god palace was once a high-level member of the Blood Demon clan? The messenger of the illusory god palace's heart was in turmoil, but he did not dare to slow down the movements of his hands. Illusory Heaven Prison. The messenger of the illusory god Palace roared, and the power of the illusory demon burst out, turning into a huge cage that reached the sky and the earth and fiercely suppressed Tianyang. Above his head, the shadow of an ancient scroll loomed. The messenger of the illusory god Palace was even forced to use the illusory demon ancient book by Tianyang. Once the illusory demon ancient book was used, it meant that this illusory demon had been forced into a desperate situation and had to fight desperately. Trap him! The messenger of the illusory god Palace roared. However, how could the ancient magical power displayed by Tianyang be so easy to deal with? Putting aside the fact that the envoy of the illusory god Palace could barely fight against a half-step great devil saint, he was no stronger than an ant in front of Tianyang. Just Wu Zun's 9th-level primordial blood seal alone was enough to make a hallucination demon like the envoy of the illusory god Palace suffer. Boom! With a loud bang, the primordial blood seal slammed into the huge cage formed by the purple illusory demonic force. The illusory demon ancient book was indeed worthy of being called the illusory demon ancient book. It was the source item of the illusory demon clan. Even though the envoy of the illusory god Palace himself wasn't very powerful, he still managed to strengthen this technique to an extremely terrifying level. However, it was still useless in the face of the primordial divine ability, the primordial blood seal. It only lasted a dozen seconds longer than an ordinary move. 10 seconds later, pa! The sound of glass shattering rang out. In the next moment, terrifying energy shockwaves shot out in all directions. The most powerful ancient blood seal itself also blasted towards the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. Damn it! This despicable bastard who came out of nowhere is actually so strong. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god roared in his heart. Su Tianxiao's strength was much stronger than he had imagined. He thought that Su Tianxiao had already used all his strength to fight against him. But in the end, this guy actually possessed a divine ability like the primordial blood seal. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god had already been caught off guard and underestimated his opponent. He was in no state, and his combat strength had decreased greatly. If he continued to fight with Tianyang, he was afraid that things would not bode well for him. Divine Temple Shield. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god roared angrily. The illusory demonic force surged as if it was about to condense a defensive martial skill in front of him. At this moment, Tianyang's eyes narrowed slightly. Go! Tianyang chuckled lightly. A sword essence that contained the slaughter domain was injected into the primordial blood seal. Suddenly, the primordial blood seal erupted with a terrifying speed as if it had been injected with chicken blood. It directly broke through the heavy blockade of the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. Boom! 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 The envoy of the palace of the illusory god had layers of defenses, treasures, sacred items, arrays, and demonic chi. However, these methods were all useless in front of the primordial blood seal that was tainted by the slaughter domain. The primordial blood seal instantly pierced through and shattered all the defenses at lightning speed. It arrived in front of the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. The blood-red, mysterious, powerful seal with infinite destructive power appeared in front of the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. In the next moment, boom! Streaks of blood-red lightning pierced through the sky. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god was directly swallowed by this seal. Seeing this, everyone around, including the city lord of ancient Yu City who was at the peak of Wu Zun's ancient Yu City, the third elder of Bloodspring Mountain who was at the 9th stage of the martial arts realm, as well as Yin Wuhua and the others who had arrived late and were dumbfounded. All of them had their mouths and eyes wide open. Their faces were filled with disbelief. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god was a supreme being in their eyes. He could suppress all the supreme beings in ancient Yu City with a flip of his hand. In fact, with the strength of the envoy of the palace of the illusory god, he could indeed make the entire ancient Yu City fall into an illusion. However, Such a mighty figure had actually been struck by a fake. Destroy! Tianyang chuckled. The primordial blood seal suddenly erupted with supreme power. The crazily surging energy was like a long spear that pierced through the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. Ah! The envoy of the palace of the illusory god suddenly raised his head and let out a heart-wrenching scream. In the next moment, he spat out a mouthful of blood. Run! The envoy of the palace of the illusory god roared. Suddenly, the blood that he spat out transformed into a human figure that was exactly the same as the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. And the envoy of the palace of the illusory god himself was at this moment. He completed the exchange between himself and the blood. This Su Tianxiao is too strong. He's not someone I can deal with. This guy has already mastered a saint path. Otherwise, with my strength, there's no way I can't fight back. The envoy of the palace of the illusory god roared crazily. I must report this to the demon son of the palace of the illusory god, or even to Lord Half-Step Demon Saint. In the next moment, the envoy of the palace of the illusory god was bathed in blood. He used a mysterious secret technique, and his body instantly burned with a bloody flame. Then, he turned into a flowing light and shot out. Ha! How could Tianyang let the emissary of the illusory god palace go free after killing him to such an extent? There was no martial soul in the Xintian great world, and demon chi was extremely rare. His sky-cloud sword had long been thirsty for it. Vast expanse 9 changes, shifting change. Tianyang's figure instantly disappeared. Then, he suddenly appeared in front of the envoy of the palace of the illusory god. The sky-cloud sword was instantly released. The true flame of destruction burned fiercely on the great void sword embryo. In the next moment, the sword slashed down. The envoy's head was split into 2. Vast amounts of pure demonic chi also surged into the great void sword embryo and was refined by the Tianxiao sword. As for the envoy of the palace of the illusory god, naturally. Chapter 1196. With a slash of a sword, black flames burned and Wu Zun died. A head fell from the sky. However, this head wasn't complete. There were still flames of destruction burning the head of the palace of the illusory god's emissary, completely engulfing the last bit of the emissary's head. Although the emissary's secret technique wasn't as fast as Tianyang's, it was still terrifying. Although it was only used for a few seconds before being stopped by Tianyang, Tianyang was now several hundred miles away from ancient Yu City. But even from several hundred miles away, the deathly silent and terrifying atmosphere in ancient Yu City could still be clearly felt. The emissary of the palace of the illusory god was dead. The emissary of the palace of the illusory god, who had a transcendent status and was like a demon god, was killed by a fake in a direct battle. Ha ha ha! At this moment, Tianyang's disguised face suddenly burst into a savage laughter. The palace of the illusory god is high and mighty, overlooking the entire demon planet. Isn't it the same? It's a demon race. Just you wait. Su Tianxiao's revenge will definitely not end here. Tianyang laughed loudly. His voice was so loud that it could be heard clearly from thousands of miles away. Rest in peace. Your soul's in heaven. Tianyang roared at the sky. Hearing this, everyone in ancient Nether City, several hundred miles away, felt a chill run down their spines. This madman actually killed someone from the palace of the illusory god. Moreover, he was so arrogant. Could it be that the palace of the illusory god is really going to suffer because of this person? The city lord of ancient Yu City thought to himself. Then, looking at Tianyang, who was flying back, he revealed a flattering smile. I didn't know Lord Su Tianxiao was coming. I was negligent before. Please, the city lord of ancient Yu City said flatteringly. Previously, the emissary of the palace of the illusory god was there, so he naturally stood on the side of the emissary. Now, even the emissary of the palace of the illusory god wasn't a match for Tianyang. Naturally, he would immediately bow down to Tianyang's sword. However, Tianyang's expression didn't change at all. Although I don't know what the flowing illusory spring you're talking about is, it should be a treasure. The trash treasure you gave the palace of the illusory god before? Tianyong said coldly. Murderous aura instantly covered the entire city lord mansion. Hearing this, the city lord of ancient city, and he hurriedly said, I had no choice. There's no need to say anything. Heavenly Sun flicked his finger, and a stream of light pierced through the ancient Nether City Lord's forehead, killing him. Chi of the illusory demon cheese at SSS Demons'. The surrounding people were instantly terrified when they saw this. Su Tianxiao actually devoured the devil chi of other devil clans to cultivate. It was no wonder that he was so strong despite looking ordinary. Those who cultivate this kind of cultivation method are all people with twisted minds. I'd better leave first, the third elder of Blood Spring Mountain said to himself. Then he retreated step by step. This ancient city seems to be on the side of the palace of the illusory god. Then he should be my enemy. Since he's an enemy, Tianyong flicked his finger again. The third elder of Blood Spring Mountain also felt a sense of danger. His expression changed drastically, and he madly rushed behind him. However, the illusory Spring Mountain split into countless rays, and one of them chose him. In the blink of an eye, the third elder of Blood Spring Mountain, Wu Zun, was instantly killed by Tianyong with a flick of his finger. The other illusory demon cultivators above Wu Zun's were also killed by Tianyong's. The boundless illusory demon Qi was forcefully drawn out. It had even materialized and shrouded the entire city lord's mansion in a black illusory demon Qi ocean. The illusory demon Qi of the palace of the illusory god, who was at the peak of Wu Zun's, was enough to benefit the Tianyong sword. Perhaps each of them was weaker than the palace of the illusory gods, but when added together, they would not be less than the palace of the illusory gods. Heavenly Firmament's sword blazed with a brilliant light. Heavenly Sun could even see traces of excitement within it. It was as if he was a glutton that hadn't eaten his fill for 800 years and had suddenly seen a mountain full of delicacies. A more terrifying devouring power than Tianyong's sky-devouring secret technique was suddenly released from the Tianyong sword. In the next moment, the surrounding illusory demon, Qi Ocean, crazily rushed into the Tianyong sword's body. The rolling illusory demon, Qi, instantly raised the grade of the Tianyong sword by a small level. If it wasn't for the fact that I can't cultivate on this illusory demon star, this place would really be my blessed land. After devouring a large amount of illusory demon Qi, Tianyong looked at the Tianyong sword, which was shining brightly and seemed to have reached a higher level. In the Tianxiao Great World, one could not use the devouring martial spirit so openly. In the Xintian Great World, there was no martial spirit or illusory demon Qi. Tianyong's cultivation had increased, but the Tianyong sword had not. As a result, Tianyong's trump card, the sky-devouring secret technique, had become weaker and weaker. But now, in just over a day on the illusory demon star, the Tianyong sword was already infinitely close to the divine grade martial spirit. If he could successfully condense the divine grade martial spirit, the Tianyong sword principle of the Saint Realm would be greatly strengthened. It was even possible that his primordial spirit would become a sage. Breaking through to the Wu Zun realm only means passing through the world's barrier. The peak Wu Zun realm can only step into the Milky Way with guidance. Only after breaking through to the Saint Realm can one travel the Milky Way and explore the endless world. No matter if it is the Demon Saint, Human Saint, or Dragon Saint, they can all transform thousands of energies for their own use. They are much more powerful than I am now. Tianyong muttered to himself. The illusory demon star was full of illusory demon Qi. If Tianyong wanted to maintain his strongest state, he had to find a desolate place with thin, illusory demon Qi. If he had broken through to the Saint Realm, Tianyong would not have to go through so much trouble. He could just swallow the illusory demon Qi like a whale. But now, I've got the information and a martial spirit strengthening martial spirit. Then, it's time to go to the black underworld soul prison. Tianyang smiled. Then, ignoring the blood on the ground, he soared into the sky. He charged toward the black underworld's soul prison. In the depths of the dark and lonely starry sky, a palace was floating silently. Around it, nebulas of illusory demon chi swallowed and spat out. The surrounding space was dyed purple and black. This was the black underworld soul prison of one of the most mysterious experts on the demon star, the great Lord of Heaven. An enemy suddenly appeared in the palace of the illusory god. Not only did he kill a genius with some status in the palace of the illusory god, but he also killed all the experts who were with him, and he even said that he would take revenge on them one by one. In the black underworld soul prison, a man hidden in the shadows shook his wine glass and chuckled. This should be the biggest loss the palace of the illusory god has suffered in the past 3,000 years. But I wonder what this clown can do to the palace of the illusory god. Will he be killed after killing a few peak Wu Zun realm experts? Or will he be caught and killed in one go? The man smiled and drank the wine in his glass. But he did not know. Chapter 1197. The great Lord of Heaven was a loner and eccentric person. Therefore, the black underworld soul prison was always hanging high in the sky of the demon star. There were only a few people who knew about the existence of the black underworld soul prison and how to get there. The third elder of the Bloodspring Mountain had only managed to obtain the information about the demon venerable transforming heaven by chance and doing some careful thinking. He thought that the information would bring benefits to the Bloody Spring Mountain one day. Unexpectedly, he met Tianyang. He made the third elder of the Bloody Spring Mountain hand over the information, and then he was killed by Tianyang with a flick of his finger. In fact, even the heavenly transformation demon venerable himself did not know that his information had been leaked to someone else without him or anyone else knowing. A person who wanted to kill him. It seems that the great Lord of Heaven's puppets have contributed a lot to the scale of the black underworld soul prison. Tianyang used the Heaven's Expanse 9 changes and flew through the starry sky. The surging demonic chi in the surroundings caused the space to distort slightly, becoming the best backdrop for the heavenly sun. He only needed to activate the illusory demon ancient book slightly. Even a demon saint would have a slim chance of finding Tianyang without knowing about the black underworld soul prison. As for suppressing Tianyang, that would be wishful thinking. The current heavenly sun was comparable to an ordinary devil saint. As for the strongest devil saint in the devil transformation star, a peak devil saint, it wouldn't be a problem at all. A peak Wu Zun actually has 3 peak Wu Zun level puppets, 18 peak Wu Zun level puppets, and hundreds of prison guards of varying strength that surround the entire Black Underworld Soul Prison. The Black Underworld Soul Prison was just a prison. Naturally, it did not have any power. However, the heavenly transformation Devil Venerable was skilled in the art of puppetry. He single-handedly created a sage sect that was not weaker than a sage sect, excluding sages. In fact, the great Lord of Heaven himself was comparable to a beginner saint. However, other than the great Lord of Heaven himself, the others are easy to deal with. Tianyang nodded slightly. Meanwhile, the Black Nether Soul Prison was getting closer and closer. In a flicker, Tianyang released the boundless Tao of the true Saint Realm. The space around him warped slightly, and in the next moment, Tianyang appeared outside the Black Nether Soul Prison. It was almost as if the great Lord of Heaven had never considered the possibility of someone breaking into his prison. There was only a single barrier around the Black Nether Soul Prison to prevent meteorites from crashing into it. As for what was used to defend against people, there was nothing. This Black Nether Soul Prison is interesting. Tianyang muttered to himself. The Black Nether Soul Prison floated in the void. From a distance, it looked like it was upside down. However, the moment Tianyang stepped into the Black Nether Soul Prison, a force similar to gravity kept him on the ground and prevented him from flying around. This technique is no worse than an ordinary lesser world construct. Tianyang had seen countless lesser worlds. At first glance, he could tell that this hall was extraordinary. This space construction technique might not have reached the Saint Realm in the Tao of Space. However, it was still much stronger than Xianyuan Kong and the others. The great Lord of Heaven was worthy of being a mighty figure that even someone like Shintian Wuzuan could only sigh in defeat. This power surpassed any enemy Tianyang had encountered so far. There are prison guards patrolling the perimeter? Suddenly, Tianyang raised an eyebrow and activated the illusory, fiend ancient book. Tianyang's figure disappeared in an instant, and in the next moment, an incomparably huge puppet that resembled a mountain of flesh walked out from the other side. However, its twisted bones and flesh were jumbled together in a disorderly fashion. Wu Zun was a third-tier Saint Realm cultivator, one of the prison guards of the Black Nethersoul prison. He was also the failed product of the Great Lord of Heaven's puppet-making technique. Even though he was a failed product, he was still a third-tier Wu Zun. It seems that the Great Lord of Heaven isn't that stupid. Now, let's follow this guy in. The Illusory Fiend Ancient Book was the condensation of the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book's life essence. It was naturally more effective than an invisibility talisman. Tianyang's aura and figure were completely concealed by the Illusory Fiend Ancient Book. Even though he was less than a meter away from the twisted puppet, it couldn't sense his aura at all. Finally, after following the puppet around the periphery of the Black Nethersoul prison for 7 or 8 turns, Tianyang arrived at an underground entrance. It's actually underground? The twisted puppet in front of him was still moving forward unconsciously. Tianyang raised an eyebrow. After entering the entrance, Tianyang felt a wave of aura. Terrifying, powerful, and at the same time, infinitely dispirited. They were the experts of various worlds who had been defeated, captured, and imprisoned here by the Great Lord of Heaven for countless years. However, he didn't sense Shintian Wuzuan's aura. Tianyang's expression darkened slightly. The place they had entered was definitely not the most heavily guarded place. If Shintian Wuzuan was imprisoned here, Tianyang could rescue him and leave. He wouldn't even need to fight with the Great Lord of Heaven. However, the Great Lord of Heaven obviously attached great importance to Shintian Wuzuan. Fine, let's go in first. Tianyang shrugged and then followed the puppet into the underground prison. Whoosh! At this moment, a terrifying gust of wind brushed past his ear. Boom! Beside him, a sharp spear pierced into the wall. Its tail was still trembling. It was obvious that the force was great. In front of him, the silent puppet suddenly turned around and bared its ferocious fangs. Roar! The puppet roared angrily. In the next moment, a terrifying flame shot towards Tianyang. There's an array at the entrance? Tianyang raised an eyebrow. Previously, when the puppet didn't react, Tianyang had let his guard down. It was only now that Tianyang noticed that there was a formation at the entrance that was operating. At this moment, human figures suddenly appeared in the surrounding shadows. They were all Wu Zun realm puppets created by the Great Lord of Heaven. At least 300. The 300 martial-honored realm martial honorables all released a terrifying murderous intent as they surrounded him. This was completely different from the gathering of 10,000 dragons at the Dragon God Assembly. At that time, although the 10,000 dragons had the strength of Wu Zun realm, they had no hostility towards Tianyang. They were equivalent to passers-by. And these 300 puppets Wu Zun, the weakest was Wu Zun realm level 3, and the strongest was even Wu Zun realm level 7. In addition, they were created by the Great Lord of Heaven, who was a peak demon venerable of the demon race. Their combat strength was much stronger than that of human cultivators of the same level. This strength, even if 2 Xinyuan Kong were here, they would have to temporarily avoid the edge. If one couldn't beat him, 300 would be enough to drown him. Forget it. Seeing that there were more and more puppets, Tianyang sighed. It seems that this emperor is not suitable to be an assassin. In the next moment, Tianyang opened his eyes. An inextinguishable flame burned in his eyes. Immortal divine body, inextinguishable eye. Chapter 1198. The Flame of Extinction. Terrifying flames instantly burst out from Tianyang's eyes, igniting the air around him. At that instant, the surroundings were turned into a terrifying sea of flames, setting the puppets on fire. The flame of extinction was a martial technique that Tianyang had mastered as he continued to cultivate the immortal eyes. It was more appropriate to call it a bloodline superpower. The immortal bloodline could be indestructible, but could also destroy the world. Boom, boom, boom. Puppets were constantly being burned by the flame of extinction. Unable to maintain the weak balance in their bodies, they instantly exploded. As for the majority of them, they were forcibly ignited by the flames. They were either burned to ashes or melted into liquid. Even the only puppet among the 300 Wuzun puppets, which was a LV7 Wuzun, did not last long in front of Tianyang's flame of extinction. In less than a minute, the 300 Wuzun puppets, which could shake any country or sect in the Shantian Great World, were burned to ashes. Not a single one survived. Very good. I've entered successfully. No one noticed. Tianyang smiled, then activated the illusory fiend ancient book again, adding layers of disguise and illusion. The formation at the entrance was not too strong. If Tianyang paid more attention, he could have easily broken it. However, the further he went, the more formations there would be, and the stronger they would be. Naturally, he had to use all his strength to activate the illusory fiend ancient book. Anyway, Tianyang had the endless spiritual sea, so he was not afraid of consumption. However, although Tianyang used the illusory fiend ancient book to conceal himself, the dazzling flames of the flame of extinction and the explosion of Wuzun puppets attracted the attention of many people in the prison. These damn guys, how did they die? In a cell, a white-haired old man, whose hands were tightly bound by chains, dragged his weak legs on the ground. He stared blankly at the broken corpses and flesh at the entrance, as well as the ashes left behind by the flame of extinction. His lips quivered, and he used all his strength to utter a hoarse and unrecognizable sentence. The warden is dead. Yesterday, they had been shuttling back and forth among the cells. From time to time, they would attack Wuzun, who was trying to escape, and even severely injure the prison guards. But now, 300 of them had died more than 10 meters away. With a flash of fire, all the prison guards were dead. I don't care who it is, even if it was the demon race. Please take us out of here. You can even blast open this prison cell. At this time, some of the cells that were not locked up by chains suddenly let out a cry of grief. He knelt on the ground and kowtowed to the air. However, there was no response. It was as if the death of the 300 puppets was a bizarre self-immolation. Seeing this, everyone's faces revealed traces of despair. Most of the Wuzun on the first floor had been captured by the Great Lord of Heaven hundreds of thousands of years ago. Their strength had long been extracted, and their bodies were so weak that they were close to death. Wuzun was not immortal. Even the Saint Realm could not achieve immortality. However, if a peak Wuzun lived in a macro world with abundant spiritual chi of heaven and earth, he would have a lifespan of at least 300,000 to 500,000 years. If he became a half-saint, he would have a lifespan of at least 1 million years. However, most of the peak Wuzun were killed by their enemies before they reached the end of their lives. They were bewitched by opportunities and were casually killed by the Saint Realm experts passing by. Those who had lived for hundreds of thousands of years were among the few long-lived Wuzun in the Shantian Great World. However, they had lived for hundreds of thousands of years. For hundreds of thousands of years, they had been imprisoned, had their vital essence extracted, and had their vital essence whipped. They would rather die. After one of them knelt down, most of the others who still had some ability to move also knelt down. However, there was still no response, except for the absence of the puppets who were supposed to appear here and drive them all back to their original positions. Everything was the same as it had been 100,000 years ago. Tianyang hid in the disguise of the phantom demon ancient book. He glanced at the numerous Wuzun who were shouting themselves hoarse and kowtowing to him, and shook his head. Those who had lived until now were all peak Wuzun. However, these peak Wuzun who should not have enjoyed the glory and wealth of their original world had to kneel down and beg for help here. This demon Venerable Hua Tian was truly vicious and merciless. However, Tianyang's purpose was to rescue Shintian Wuzuan. As for the others, although Tianyang had the power, he did not care. Before rescuing Shintian Wuzuan, anything else would only cause unnecessary trouble. Finally, Tianyang came to the entrance of the second floor. From the outside, the black underworld soul prison looked like it had layers. However, the strange thing was that if one wanted to enter the second floor from the first floor underground, they had to go down. Even Wu Zun's Space Saint Path can't go this far. Tianyang raised his eyebrows and showed a trace of curiosity. Could it be that the black underworld soul prison had a history? The second floor of the black underworld soul prison. Like the first floor, countless jailers patrolled. Countless Wu Zun were imprisoned in a small cage less than 3 square meters. However, this time, he had used his Saint Realm Formation Dao to directly erase the formation before it was activated. However, the destruction of the array still attracted the attention of the numerous martial honorable realm puppets on the second floor. There were fewer than the 300 puppets on the first floor, but they were twice as strong. It would be difficult for the exterminating flames to kill them instantly. Tianyang threw out a few more true flames of destruction and wiped out all the jailers on the second floor. The second floor is also a perfect place to sneak in without being discovered. Tianyang smiled, and in the next moment he stretched out his hand. The formation on the third floor twisted instantly. The reverse formation technique was activated. After reaching the Saint Realm Formation Dao, the reverse formation technique, which had taken him a long time to use, finally had a chance to be used. In the blink of an eye, Tianyang gained control of the formation, and Tianyang stepped into the third floor. The Black Underworld Soul Prison had 5 floors in total. The first and second floors were used to imprison Wu Zun, who had been extracted for more than 30,000 years and no longer had any value. The third floor was used to imprison Wu Zun, who still had a lot of value after 30,000 years. Similarly, the jailers here were stronger. A pale and gloomy ghost face appeared in front of Tianyang. The aura of Wu Zun at his peak was released from the ghost face. It was one of the 3 strongest puppets of the Great Lord of Heaven, the Ghost Face Heavenly King. Why didn't this stupid intelligence report say that the Ghost Face Heavenly King can sense the fluctuations of the Phantom Demon Ancient Book? Tianyang twitched the corner of his mouth and had the urge to drag out the 3rd Elder of Bloodspring Mountain and beat him up again. At this moment, Chapter 1199. I didn't expect a fly to break into the Black Abyss Soul Prison when I wasn't paying attention. The Great Lord of Heaven smiled as he watched Tianyang fighting the Ghostface Heavenly King on the 3rd floor. He turned around and looked at the man closest to him, who was also the most secure. This guy seems to have the aura of the All Heaven's sword on him. Why do you think he came here? The Great Lord of Heaven chuckled. The man who had his eyes closed suddenly widened his eyes. All Heaven's sword. 30,000 years ago, he lost to the Great Lord of Heaven and lost the sword in an unknown great world. That's right. I'm also a little surprised that the All Heaven's sword could still be preserved. I can only say that the old bastard Shun Xian gave me something special. The Great Lord of Heaven chuckled. Don't you think so, Shintian Wuzuan? The 5th floor of the Black Abyss Soul Prison. There was only a cage and a set of table and chairs on the 5th floor. The Great Lord of Heaven sat on the chair, and Shintian Wuzuan was in the cage, surrounded by countless sharp blades. As the first human to almost kill me in 100,000 years, Wu Zun, what do you think of this fly that suddenly broke in? The Great Lord of Heaven chuckled. He didn't think much of Tianyang at all. Upon hearing that, the man who was surrounded by layers of sharp blades and bleeding profusely and mysteriously disappeared into the ground revealed a mocking smile. I can kill a piece of trash like you. The Great Lord of Heaven's face twitched and turned cold. Then, he waved his hand with a cold smile. The scene that could only be seen by him was suddenly magnified so that every corner of the 5th floor could see it clearly. Very well, I'll let you see it with your own eyes. What's the difference between my puppet now and my puppet back then? TSK, a pure primordial spirit body. Has it been tainted by demonic chi? Tianyang casually repelled the ghastly ghost face in front of him, chuckled, and swallowed all the demon chi that escaped. Although the ghost face Heavenly King's name was domineering, the power he unleashed did not match his domineering name. After all, Tianyang's primordial spirit had been at the peak of Wu Zun's primordial spirit for a long time. There was even a qualitative change caused by a quantitative change. There was a trace of the saint realm. Such a powerful primordial spirit power could kill any peak Wu Zun in seconds. Although the ghastly ghost face had been modified by the great Lord of Heaven to be somewhat terrifying, it was actually just so. Tianyang would have burned it to ashes with true flames of destruction if he was not afraid that there would be no more demon chi to devour if he killed it. The ghost face Heavenly King is one of my most powerful creations. It took 82 primordial spirits of Wu Zun at the peak of the 3rd floor to make it. It was born with incomparably strong resentment. With my infusion, even you might not be a match for the ghost face Heavenly King back then, let alone a little fly that sneaked in. The great Lord of Heaven sneered and mocked. Looking at Tianyang, who was constantly swinging his sword to repel the ghastly ghost face's attacks, he showed great disdain. Such an attack had almost no effect on the ghost face Heavenly King. How could it defeat the ghost face Heavenly King with this? Just wait. In less than 10 minutes, this little fly will be exhausted and become a part of the ghost face Heavenly King. Demon Venerable Hua Tian sneered, while the divine Heaven Marshal Venerable's expression did not change as he spat out a sentence. I think a piece of trash like you will be killed by this little guy first. The great Lord of Heaven's expression turned cold when he heard this. Let's see how stubborn you can be when this little fly is dead. Meanwhile, on the 3rd floor of the Soul Prison of Darkness, Tianyang executed the vast expanse 9 transformations and instantly dodged the primordial spirit attacks that covered a wide area. With a casual wave of his hand, stars flew out one after another like shooting stars. They pierced through the body of the ghastly ghost face. Is this all the demon chi he has? Tianyang frowned when he sensed that the demon chi he had absorbed was less than half of what the emissary of the palace of the illusory god had absorbed. The ghastly ghost face was much stronger than the emissary of the palace of the illusory god, but the amount of demon chi Tianyang had absorbed was so little. My ghost face Heavenly King is my most outstanding creation in the past 20,000 years. There are countless human experts in the galaxy who have their eyes on my soul prison of darkness, and they have obtained many martial skills that can counter demon chi. Therefore, I used Wu Zun's primordial spirit as the foundation, and the demon chi is just a supplement. When Demon Venerable Heavenly Transformation Demon Venerable saw Heavenly Sun's frown, he immediately laughed loudly. Countless human cultivators had tried to kill Demon Sovereign Hua Tian when he released the ghost face Heavenly King. However, they soon realized that something was wrong with the ghost face Heavenly King. The Dharma treasures that they were so proud of were useless in front of the ghost face Heavenly King. Instead, they were hunted down by the ghost face Heavenly King. Because of this, at least dozens of peak stage Wu Zun had died under the ghost face Heavenly King. Tianyang would become one of those dozens. Your primordial spirit is rotten, and your demon chi is worthless. What's the use of having you? Tianyang frowned and stood still. He didn't want to waste any more time. The great Lord of Heaven laughed even harder. You dare to stop in front of the ghost face Heavenly King? Shintian Wuzuan, the person you chose for your sword is not so good. The face of the divine sky martial sovereign, who had been mocking him, sank slightly when he heard that. Although he had been imprisoned for 30,000 years, he still had his extraordinary battle experience from back then. Before this, Tianyang had been dodging and only occasionally used a few martial skills to repel the ghost face Heavenly King. Now that he stood still, wasn't this giving the ghost face Heavenly King a chance to kill him? Go to hell! The ghost face Heavenly King screamed, and primordial spirit attacks that could kill peak stage Wu Zun turned into long thorns and shot toward Tianyang. Blood flashed, and the world dimmed. The great Lord of Heaven laughed. He couldn't wait to see Shun Tian Wuzuan's collapse and his face turn ashen. Trash. Kill him. At this moment, Tianyang exhaled. I have a mouthful of Xian Huang Qi that can swallow the world, the sun, the moon, and the stars. In one breath, it suddenly burst out and turned into a terrifying Saint Realm sword that shot toward the ghost-face Heavenly King. The Saint Realm sword Dao could kill people, bodies, and primordial spirit. The sword shot out, and the sword light illuminated the world. The great Lord of Heaven's expression froze. In the next moment, the fragments of the Yuan spirit that were flying in the air instantly exploded under the sword Qi. Chapter 1200. The strongest man under the great Lord of Heaven. A peak Wu Zun in the form of a primordial spirit, Ghostface Heavenly King. He was killed in a single breath. In fact, it didn't even have the slightest ability to resist. Even the blood-colored spike didn't manage to touch the corner of Heavenly Sun's clothes before it completely disappeared. On the other side, the Wu Zun experts who were watching Tianyang in the corner furthest away from the battlefield were all trembling. The third floor didn't have hundreds of half-formed jailers like the first and second floors. However, there was a peak Wu Zun, Ghostface Heavenly King. With Ghostface Heavenly King around, these Wu Zun experts wouldn't be able to step out of the cage, even if they gathered all their strength. After all, Ghostface Heavenly King was in the form of a primordial spirit. Even Tianyang's normal attacks would be greatly reduced if they landed on Ghostface Heavenly King. Not to mention, some of these Wu Zun experts didn't even know how to attack the primordial spirit. Asking them to fight Ghostface Heavenly King was tantamount to suicide. Therefore, they had lost all hope of leaving. Some even hypnotized themselves that the black underworld soul prison was the real world. However, all their despair and fantasies were shattered at this moment. Ghostface Heavenly King was dead. Ha 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 ha. Seeing this, a burst of crazy laughter burst out from one of the cages. It was the laughter of someone who had been oppressed for a long time and was finally liberated. He laughed hysterically, as if he wanted to laugh all the air he had left behind while at death's door. Immediately, this wild laughter spread to the other cultivators as well. The entire third floor was suddenly filled with laughter. Tianyang frowned slightly. He wasn't as optimistic as these peak Wu Zun experts. Ghostface Heavenly King was indeed dead, but the strongest man in the black underworld soul prison hadn't shown up yet. As soon as Tianyang fought with Ghostface Heavenly King, he realized that someone was spying on him. Unsurprisingly, it was the great Lord of Heaven. However, Shun Tian Wuzuan isn't on the third floor. Is Shun Tian Wuzuan that strong? Tianyang glanced around, but there was no sign of Shun Tian Wuzuan. If not for the fact that the vibrations of the All-Heaven swords were getting more and more intense, and that the sword spirit of the All-Heaven swords was getting more and more excited, Tianyang would have thought that the divine Heaven Martial Lord was already dead. The fifth floor. Impossible. Demon Venerable Heaven, transforming Demon Venerable angrily slammed the table. The table that was completely made of top-grade devil stones was instantly reduced to dust. The heavenly transformation Demon Venerable's handsome face suddenly became distorted. His eyes suddenly became bloodshot. Ghostface Heavenly King was his strongest puppet at the moment. If Tianyang had fought tens of thousands of rounds to kill Ghostface Heavenly King, the great Lord of Heaven would have accepted it. He might even have admired Tianyang's strength. But after dodging for almost 10 minutes and launching thousands of attacks, Ghostface Heavenly King had killed him in one blow. It was completely different from when he'd been suppressed. He's been hiding his strength. The great Lord of Heaven roared. Shintian Wuzuan chuckled. How can someone chosen by all heavens sword be weak? You'd better wash your neck clean and wait for this kid's sword, you piece of trash. Though they were separated by a screen, Shintian Wuzuan could still recognize Tianyang's sword. Saint-level swordsmanship and an extraordinary cultivation. Shintian Wuzuan immediately understood. With Tianyang's current strength, All Heaven's sword was dispensable to him. Whether he listened to All Heaven's sword or not, All Heaven's sword couldn't do anything to him. But Tianyang had still come. One man and one sword. He'd crossed the stars and arrived at the black abyss soul prison. All Heaven sword is a good judge of character. Divine Heaven Marshal Venerable smiled with a complex expression. At this time, Demon Venerable Heaven, transforming Demon Venerable's eyes, turned blood red, and he coldly snorted. Fine. Ants are ants after all. No matter how outstanding they are, they can't change their nature. You think you're strong for killing Ghostface Heavenly King? Then let me show him what true terror is. Demon Venerate Sky, transforming Demon Venerate roared. The puppet that he had painstakingly crafted had been killed by Tianyang in a single breath. The great Lord of Heaven was now burning with rage. He only wanted to tear Tianyang to pieces bit by bit. Whoosh! A silver light flashed, and the 5th level of the Black Abyss Soul Prison was suddenly empty. On the 3rd level, a human silhouette in a huge cage suddenly appeared. Suddenly, the laughter and cheers that resounded through the 3rd level came to an abrupt halt, as if someone had pressed the pause button. Countless pupils dilated, and their focus was fixed on the figure that suddenly appeared. Hiss! These peak martial highnesses were like male ducks that had been grabbed by the neck. Their expressions changed drastically, and they were terrified to the extreme. For a moment, the 3rd level of the Black Abyss Soul Prison was so quiet that one could hear a pin drop. The master of the Black Abyss Soul Prison, the creator of Ghostface Heavenly King, was countless times more powerful than him. The great Lord of Heaven. Tianyang's eyes sharpened at this moment, and he looked up and down at the great Lord of Heaven. He tightened his grip on the great void sword embryo. The great Lord of Heaven's face was as handsome as all the heavenly demons that Tianyang had seen. His figure was also very well proportioned. He was about 2 meters tall, but he wasn't thin. Even though 70% of his body was covered by the black robe, one could still see the great Lord of Heaven's figure. However, that wasn't the most important thing. Instead, the faint aura of the 3 holy Daos radiated from Demon Venerable Hua Tian's body. As expected, the great Lord of Heaven had not only cultivated a holy path, but also surpassed Xianyuan Kong, Qi Yingtian, and Jin Zhan. He had successfully cultivated a 2nd holy path, and was close to 3 holy paths. The cage behind the great Lord of Heaven also caught Tianyang's attention. He just glanced at it. Clink! The all-heavens sword in Tianyang's body suddenly let out a sword cry and appeared in Tianyang's hand. It couldn't wait to rush over. As for the heavenly sun, it slowly overlapped the image of the arrogant-looking man who was bleeding profusely in the iron cage with the image in its memory. A part of Shuntian Wuzuan's memory had helped Tianyang a lot. Without it, Tianyang didn't know how many opportunities and treasures he would have missed. And Shuntian Wuzuan's 10,000 swords in the All-Heaven Sword had allowed Tianyang to kill the Demon Emperor and survive the Blood Sea catastrophe of the Tianshao Great World. Now, Shuntian Wuzuan appeared in front of Tianyang. Brat, my brat is really dead. At this moment, the great Lord of Heaven raised his hand. In his hand was a crystal-clear fragment of the primordial spirit. The aura of the Ghostface Heavenly King had completely disappeared. Now, it was just a fragment of the primordial spirit with 99% of its power dissipated. The great Lord of Heaven's face instantly turned ferocious. Die! His figure flashed and disappeared. When he reappeared, he was already behind Tianyang. He punched out. Chapter 1201. The raging demonic aura instantly triggered a rare phenomenon. Everything in the surroundings was transformed into a terrifying storm. This power, instantly, the countless martial highnesses who were still yelling in the cages were terrified. They immediately turned around and ran away. Similar to the battle between Tianyang and the Ghostface Heavenly King, they immediately hid in a corner, afraid that the terrifying demonic aura storm would affect them. However, even so, the cages closest to the great Lord of Heaven were destroyed by the terrifying demonic aura storm. Wu Zun, who was hiding in the cages, was naturally turned into ashes without any resistance. Bang! Tianyang turned around and unleashed the fledgling form of the Dragon Emperor's body, causing a ball of true flames of destruction to burn. Dragon Emperor's fist. Tianyang let out a roar and collided with the great Lord of Heaven's fist. In the blink of an eye, a halo that was many times stronger than the storm spread out in all directions with the two fists as the center. In the next moment, the ground beneath their feet instantly cracked open. However, large chunks of the ground flew up into the sky. Whoosh! Tianyang executed the heavenly expanse 9 changes and disappeared on the spot. In less than a second, a sharp ray of light appeared where Tianyang had been standing. If Tianyang had been a second slower, the ray of light would not have pierced through the air, but through Tianyang's body. As expected of the great Lord of Heaven, this power is indeed extraordinary. Tianyang's face darkened as he looked into the distance and saw the great Lord of Heaven disappearing with him. Streams of demonic aura that resembled flames were burning on his hand. Even with the fledgling form of the Dragon Emperor's body, it was difficult to eliminate the demonic aura. The heavenly sword martial spirit was activated and devoured the demonic aura flames in an instant. However, Tianyang's right hand was still shaken by the great Lord of Heaven's punch. This was the first time since Tianyang had cultivated the embryonic form of the Dragon Emperor that he had been at a disadvantage in terms of physical strength. However, the body of the Dragon Emperor was still the body of the Dragon Emperor after all. Tianyang had created his own path, a path of absolute body refinement. Even in its embryonic form, it wasn't much weaker than the great Lord of Heaven. Now, the great Lord of Heaven was probably clenching his fist and screaming. Who would have thought that an ordinary-looking ant would actually possess such physical strength? At this moment, the great Lord of Heaven raised his hand and countless demonic auras swept up, instantly extinguishing the true flames of destruction that Tianyang had left on his fist. In the next moment, the corners of the great Lord of Heaven's mouth curled up. Then, a terrifying fist smashed down on Tianyang's head. But you still have to die. The great Lord of Heaven roared and suddenly released the heavenly demon bloodline. Compared to the demon emperor's heavenly demon bloodline, it was countless times purer. The great Lord of Heaven's bloodline was already close to that of a pure-blooded heavenly demon. If not, how could he have cultivated 2 saint paths and was about to step into the third one? Submerged demon fist. The great Lord of Heaven roared and punched down. Terrifying demonic aura spread out like an explosion, turning into a pillar of demonic aura that soared into the sky. The great Lord of Heaven, who had drawn out this pillar of demonic aura, was like a demon god. He wanted to shatter the heavenly sun under his fist. Who gave you the confidence? Tianyang snorted coldly. The embryonic form of the Dragon Emperor was activated to the limit. At the same time, the Saint Realm Sword Dao was integrated into his body. The Sword Dao had entered the Saint Realm. Tianyang had done it. His body was the sword. One punch was a fierce and domineering sword technique. Boom! Sky sword technique. First sword, sky soaring. Tianyang used his fist as a sword, integrated the terrifying power of the embryonic form of the Dragon Emperor's body, and collided with the great Lord of Heaven's submerged demon fist. In an instant, destructive energy waves burst out in all directions. In just an instant, hundreds of cages were destroyed by the aftermath of the battle. Not even a speck of dust was left of the people inside. After all, whether it was Tianyang or the great Lord of Heaven, their actual combat strength had long surpassed their cultivation. When they burst out with their full strength, they were not weaker than a battle of life and death between 2 peak half-saints. The great Lord of Heaven had obviously spent a lot of effort to create these cages. However, in the face of a battle of this level, they were just tofu. They were so weak that they could be destroyed with one blow. However, what surprised Tianyang was that Shun Tianwuzun's cage was the closest to Tianyang and the great Lord of Heaven among these hundreds of cages. However, the prison thousands of meters away had been reduced to ashes, yet this ordinary-looking iron cage was still undamaged. This level of importance has far surpassed that of an ordinary peak Wuzun. Even if he has mastered the Saint Realm, it shouldn't be this serious. A thought suddenly flashed through Tianyang's mind. At this moment, a bloodthirsty light suddenly burst out. Blood-devouring, demonic saber. A sinister laugh sounded. In the next moment, the great Lord of Heaven turned into a stream of light and charged toward Tianyang. A long saber with a terrifying appearance had appeared in his hand at some point. It shone with rays of blood-red light, and the saber fell. That blood-red color even dyed the space around it. This is the demonic saint weapon. Interesting. Tianyang looked at the demonic blood-devouring saber in the great Lord of Heaven's hand and smiled slightly. A demonic saint weapon was equivalent to a saint weapon. Tianyang's great void sword embryo was also a saint weapon. However, the great Lord of Heaven's demonic blood-devouring saber was obviously much more powerful than the great void sword embryo. It had already reached the peak of a saint weapon and was not far from the great saint realm. Soul-shattering blood. The great Lord of Heaven roared and slashed down with his saber. Violent and terrifying demonic chi suddenly surged and formed a sea of blood-red and black energy in the surroundings. It instantly surged up. At this moment, a terrifying blood-red saber light tore through the space and arrived in front of Tianyang. Fleeting beauty. Tianyang roared and slashed with his sword. The Tao of life and death and the Saint Realm sword Tao merged into one. Dual Saint Tao? No wonder you have the guts to attack my black underworld soul prison. The great Lord of Heaven's eyes revealed a trace of surprise when he felt the aura of two Saint Tao emanating from the black and white saber light. In the hundreds of thousands of years that he had lived near the demonic planet, there were only a handful of Wu Zun realm geniuses who had attained the Saint Tao. As for those who had mastered the dual Saint Tao, there had only been one in these hundreds of thousands of years. That one had attained the Tao and become a saint after a mere 100,000 years. However, he had been killed before he could fully unleash his potential. Now, Tianyang was the second person who had attained the dual Saint Tao that the great Lord of Heaven had seen. Interesting, but the great Lord of Heaven chuckled, and there was a trace of contempt in his eyes. The blood-red saber light suddenly bared its ferocious fangs. The aura of three Saint Tao condensed within it. I am one of the three holy paths. The aura of the Tao of Blood Demon, the Tao of Space, and the Tao of Saber of Saint Realm bloomed from the great Lord of Heaven. In just a moment. Chapter 1202. The Saint Realm. Ever since Tianyang started cultivating, the most powerful enemy he had ever encountered was Tianlong's Saint, who was in the Saint Realm. Even against Tianlong's Saint, Tianyang had only exchanged a few blows with him. They hadn't really started fighting. After all, Tianlong's Saint was an old monster who had cultivated for millions of years. Although Tianyang was very confident, he didn't think he could really defeat him. It was possible when he reached the peak of the half-saint realm or entered the saint realm. Therefore, Tianyang, whose combat strength was close to the saint realm, had become Tianyang's greatest enemy. Die! The moment the three saint paths bloomed, the blood-red saber radiance suddenly burst out with extremely bright and terrifying power. The next moment, it turned into a surging wave, violently rushing toward Tianyang. The surrounding demonic chi surged as if it was going to devour the heavenly sun. Is it really three saint paths? Tianyang glanced at the great Lord of Heaven. He had guessed that the great Lord of Heaven had two saint paths and one half-saint path. Now it seemed that he had underestimated him. The great Lord of Heaven had cultivated for hundreds of thousands of years. He had even killed Wu Zun at the peak of the half-saint realm to build the black underworld soul prison. Three saint paths were not easy to obtain, but it was very normal. However, even if it was three saint paths, Tianyang didn't show much shock on his face. The great void sword embryo in his hand shone wildly, sword breaking 9 barons, samsara of life and death. The Saint Realm sword principle was exerted to the extreme, and the perfect combination of life and death and sword principle. 2 beams of sword radiance burst out from the great void sword embryo at the same time, as if tearing apart the Milky Way, and violently slashed at the blood-red saber radiance. The saber radiance was like a blood-red wave that dyed the world red. The sword radiance was like a black lightning that tore apart the Milky Way. It was as if the Milky Way was really torn apart. From the side, a black and blood-red crack suddenly appeared in the boundless Milky Way. Boom! A deafening sound erupted from the black Nether Soul prison. However, it would only erupt in the black Nether Soul prison. As for the Milky Way, no matter how loud the sound was, it wouldn't be able to spread. But even so, the entire third level of the black Nether Soul prison was almost destroyed by the shockwaves. Are these two going to tear down the entire black Nether Soul prison? Shuntian Wuzuan, who was in the iron cage, looked at the two people fighting fiercely. He was shocked. He had speculated about Tianyang's strength, but he had never expected him to be so young. He actually had strength that was not inferior to his own. In fact, it was even better than that. After all, after Shintian Wuzuan had been captured by the Great Lord of Heaven, his true essence and cultivation had been crazily squeezed out. It was already a miracle that he could maintain his strength without regressing. If he used the 30,000 years to cultivate, he would definitely reach the half-saint realm, if not the saint realm. However, Shintian Wuzuan had a feeling. Even if he hadn't been captured by the Great Lord of Heaven in the past 30,000 years, he was afraid that he wouldn't be able to defeat Tianyang. But the Great Lord of Heaven has cultivated 3 saint paths. 3 saint paths, not only in the Shintian Great World, but even in Shintian Wuzuan's original world, he would be a brilliant genius. The Great Lord of Heaven had reached this level, and with the accumulation of hundreds of thousands of years, he might be able to fight against a Saint Realm expert. Boom! There was another loud explosion. Tianyang grunted as blood seeped out from the corner of his mouth. At this moment, Demon Venerable Heaven, transforming Demon Venerable, was not slow at all. His figure suddenly disappeared from the spot. The Black Nether Soul prison was his home ground. Even if Tianyang released the massacre field, it could only prevent him from freely controlling the space in the Black Nether Soul prison. In a real fight, the Great Lord of Heaven could still easily explode with extreme speed. Have a taste of the desperation of 3 saint paths. The Great Lord of Heaven laughed wildly. The blood-devouring demonic saber in his hand shone with a bloodthirsty light, and he slashed down violently. In an instant, the space cracked, and the surrounding demonic chi surged wildly. It was as if this slash could even split a peak half-saint in half. Tianyang blocked with his sword. However, the Great Lord of Heaven had not only cultivated demonic chi to the peak of the demonic venerable, but he had also cultivated 3 saint paths. His physical body had also been refined to perfection. After using 3 saint paths, Tianyang's embryonic form of the body of the Dragon Emperor might not be able to defeat him. Bang! Tianyang spat out a mouthful of blood and was instantly sent flying. Seeing this, the Great Lord of Heaven burst into wild laughter again. Seeing this, countless peak martial saints raised their defenses to prevent the aftershocks from affecting them. At the same time, they worriedly watched the battle, and all of them revealed anxious expressions. After using 3 saint paths, Tianyang, who had been able to fight the Great Lord of Heaven head-on, was instantly defeated. The power of these 3 saint paths was actually so terrifying. Now, the Great Lord of Heaven smiled savagely, and the blood-devouring demonic saber in his hand shone with a blood-red demonic light that had never been seen before. Demonic saber, break the galaxy with 1 slash. The Great Lord of Heaven laughed loudly and slashed down. At this moment, the corners of Tianyang's mouth suddenly curled into a strange arc. The next moment, the demonic aura that the Great Lord of Heaven had gathered suddenly went berserk. It rushed down toward Tianyang. This is much better than the best environment to use the heaven-devouring secret technique in the past. Tianyang chuckled. In the next moment, before the Great Lord of Heaven could react, a terrifying light bloomed. Tianyang's aura also skyrocketed at this moment. Wuzuan LV9. Wuzuan peak LV9. Half-step to Saint Realm. Tianyang's aura skyrocketed directly to the half-saint realm, and in an instant, he broke through the confinement technique created by the demonic saber. Then he slashed out with his sword. 3 Saint Paths, so what? For Saint Paths, understand? Tianyang chuckled. The great void sword embryo shone with 4 different lights. Saint Realm Sword Principle, Life and Death Tao, Myriad Tao, and Boundless Tao. He slashed out with his sword. Its power was 10,000 times more terrifying than the Great Lord of Heaven's attack. The Great Lord of Heaven suppressed Tianyang with his Saint Path. Now, Tianyang not only suppressed 4 Saint Paths, but also 3 Saint Paths. His cultivation had also stepped into the half-saint realm. Double suppression. How is this possible? Hua Tian Demon Venerable's face instantly distorted. He felt that his 3 holy paths were extremely terrifying. In the end, Tianyang actually had 4 Saint Paths, and Wu Zun, who was an LV9, also had a secret technique that could increase his strength. Retreat. The Great Lord of Heaven was not stupid. He only had 3 Saint Paths fighting with Tianyang, who had 4 Saint Paths, would be suicide. Where there was life, there was hope. It was better to escape directly, break through to the half-saint realm, and then kill Tianyang. Do you know why I didn't kill you in seconds? Tianyang suddenly spoke. The Great Lord of Heaven was also stunned. Look, where is this? Tianyang chuckled. At this moment, an angry roar erupted from behind the Great Lord of Heaven. In a corner of the 3rd level of the Darkness Soul Prison. Chapter 1203. Feel the fury of being imprisoned for 30,000 years. A furious roar rang out from behind the Great Lord of Heaven. A terrifying beam of sword light tore through the air, heading straight for the Great Lord of Heaven. What? Seeing this, Demon Venerable Hua Tian's expression changed greatly. He wasn't just in the corner of the 3rd level of the Black Abyss Soul Prison, but also between Shintian Wuzuan and Tianyang. There was nothing around him, but it was very narrow. There wasn't much space to dodge. If he fought head-on, whether it was Tianyang's 4 Sacred Swords of Tao or Shintian Wuzuan's all-out attack, both were enough to injure him. Damn it, the Great Lord of Heaven's face twisted. He'd always viewed humans as ants, bastards, and trash. But now, Tianyang, a human who looked very young and didn't have much strength to begin with, had forced him into a corner. Get out of my way! Demon Venerable Hua Tian roared. In the next moment, a terrifying demonic aura burst out. The Great Lord of Heaven turned around and charged toward Shintian Wuzuan, who was the weakest of the 3. Seeing this, Tianyang smiled. Previously, the all-heaven's swords had been eager to rush out. If the heavenly sun had remained in his body, the all-heaven's sword spirit, which had not matured to begin with, would probably have interfered with his battle. But things would be different if he let it out. No matter how weak the all-heaven sword was, it was still a holy weapon. Moreover, it had been infused with Tianyang's saintly sword Tao and life and death Tao. Coupled with Shintian Wuzuan's cooperation, it was only natural that the cage would shatter. From the moment the Great Lord of Heaven had been driven by anger to pursue Tianyang, everything had been part of Tianyang's plan. 10,000 swords to origin, 3rd sword, spiral of destruction. With a roar, Shintian Wuzuan's saintly sword Tao and life and death Tao were unleashed. The life and death Tao completely belonged to the all-heaven sword, while the saintly sword Tao was a combination of Shintian Wuzuan's and Tianyang's power. What? The Great Lord of Heaven's pupils shrank. Back then, Shintian Wuzuan didn't know the life and death Tao. He couldn't even unleash this sword. A beam of black and white sword light flashed out, matching Tianyang's sword, breaking 9 barons. One after the other, they charged toward the Great Lord of Heaven. Indeed, after 30,000 years, Shintian Wuzuan was no longer a match for the Great Lord of Heaven. However, there was no need for Shintian Wuzuan to face the Great Lord of Heaven head-on. He only needed to stop him for a moment. That was enough. Tianyang had left a huge amount of dual saintly path power in the all-heaven sword just for this moment. Boom! The Great Lord of Heaven wildly slashed out beams of sword light, shattering Shintian Wuzuan's sword. However, he couldn't avoid being stopped by the sword. At the same time, the Great Void Sword Embryo attacked. 10,000 Mammoth Annihilation. Tianyang roared angrily, and the four saintly paths merged into one. The myriad path was the best way to merge countless saintly paths. It was also the reason why Tianyang was able to unleash four saintly paths at once. With the infinitely inclusive myriad path, Tianyang could easily merge his sword moves into a saintly path. Now it was no exception. Boom! The sword with terrifying power shattered space and shattered the universe. It hit the great Lord of Heaven. The great Lord of Heaven instantly spat out blood. His entire body was penetrated by the sword. The sword light slashed through the great Lord of Heaven, but its power didn't diminish at all. Instead, it charged forward at an even faster speed. Boom! From left to right, it pierced through the entire Black Abyss Soul Prison and violently bombarded the border of the Black Abyss Soul Prison. The border kept trembling, as if it couldn't withstand the pressure of the four saintly paths. Soon, the border. Cracks spread across it, and it instantly exploded. Boom! The Black Abyss Soul Prison was pierced through. The myriad destruction sword's power didn't diminish at all. It instantly exploded with extreme speed and charged into the boundless galaxy. There was no sound. However, near the Black Abyss Soul Prison, a meteorite as large as dozens of Black Abyss Soul Prisons was cut open by the sword. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. It wasn't until now that the myriad destruction sword dissipated. One sword to break the star. Seeing this, Shintian Wuzuan was shocked. He felt extremely lucky that he had dodged to the side as soon as Tianyang attacked. Otherwise, this sword could have pierced through the great Lord of Heaven, destroyed the Black Abyss Soul Prison, and cut open the meteorite. It could have also cut him in half. Boom! The great Lord of Heaven's body was suddenly cut in half. Monstrous demonic chi spread wildly in all directions. At the same time, streams of murky black demonic blood splattered in all directions. The entire Black Abyss Soul Prison rumbled loudly. It was as if the master had died. However, Tianyang's expression didn't change at all. He even wanted to laugh. He's not completely dead yet. The blood and demonic chi are escaping in all directions. Who are you pretending for? The Black Abyss Soul Prison is broken, but that doesn't mean the gravity is gone. Tianyang casually waved his hand. The true flames of destruction burned in his hand. The demonic chi and demonic blood all around flew toward him. However, before the demonic chi touched the true flames of destruction, it instantly condensed into a ferocious human face and screamed madly at Tianyang. How dare you destroy my body? Didn't you want to save Shintian Wuzuan? I'll give him to you now. Get out of here. The great Lord of Heaven screamed madly. Deep in his voice, there was still deep fear. He was too strong. There was no reason to speak of. Even if the great Lord of Heaven had cultivated 3 saint paths to a certain level, he was still too strong. Tianyang's 4 saint paths were still able to crush him instantly. One sword to break the star. That was the realm of a sage. Even an ordinary saint realm expert might not be able to do this. Tianyang's sword just now was powerful enough to fight a sage. You make it sound like I'm only trying to save Shintian Wuzuan, and you're only trying to stop me from saving Shintian Wuzuan. Tianyang sneered. In the next moment, the true flames of destruction burned. He was too lazy to talk nonsense with the great Lord of Heaven. My big sword has been thirsty for a long time. With the demonic star devouring it, the heavenly sword was only a little bit away from becoming a divine martial soul. When it devoured all of the great Lord of Heaven's demonic chi, the heavenly sword would definitely be able to enter the sage realm. Spiritual fire was extremely destructive to the primordial spirit and soul. Even the demonic soul of the demon clan was no exception. The great Lord of Heaven's soul was ignited in an instant, and the heavenly sword devoured a huge amount of demonic chi at the same time. In the end, the great Lord of Heaven didn't even have time to say a word before his demonic soul was completely burned and turned into ashes. The heavenly sword also devoured all of the demonic chi of the great Lord of Heaven and the black underworld soul prison. Shintian Wuzuan, protect me. Tianyang only had time to whisper, before he sat down cross-legged and entered a state of cultivation. He had a hunch. Chapter 1204. Terrifying and powerful ripples were constantly moving around Tianyang's body. Shintian Wuzuan, who was guarding Tianyang, couldn't help but tremble with fear. It wasn't that he hadn't guarded Tianyang before. Back in the day, he had guarded his senior and junior brothers countless times. However, this was the first time he had guarded Tianyang from several miles away. It couldn't be helped. Tianyang's terrifying destructive energy was too strong. Even he didn't want to get close. Within a radius of 5 miles around Heavenly Sun's body, there was violent, demonic energy, terrifying true flames of destruction, an unknown but incomparably mysterious bloodline power, and a strange power. Although the strange power and demonic chi were the main factors, the true flames of destruction and the power of the bloodline increased the danger within 5 miles by countless times. Shintian Wuzuan had reason to believe that at this moment, even if a peak Wuzun was randomly thrown in, he would most likely die. This guy is too strong. Shintian Wuzuan sighed. He could sense Tianyang's real age, but that was it. With the disguise of the illusion fiend ancient book, Shintian Wuzuan didn't even know that Tianyang's cultivation had not reached the peak Wuzun. He didn't even know if this was Tianyang's true face. As for the all-heaven sword, it flickered slightly. Devour, devour, devour. In the sea of souls. The enormous demonic energy seemed to pollute this part of the sea of souls. In the center of the sea of souls, a long sword was madly devouring the demonic energy like a whale. Tianyang had underestimated the terrifying demonic energy that the great Lord of Heaven had accumulated after so many years of cultivation. Perhaps the great Lord of Heaven alone wasn't too much, but if the black underworld soul prison was added, it would be incomparably terrifying. After all, the black underworld soul prison was a huge palace that had absorbed tens of thousands of years' worth of demonic energy. The demonic energy space around the black underworld soul prison was even created by the black underworld soul prison. The direct result was that Tianyang's Sea of Souls was occupied by the demonic energy. Of course, with the heavenly firmament sword guarding it, its sheer size might not be a problem. It could even refine the power of Tianyang's primordial spirit. If I devour so much demonic energy, I'm afraid it won't be a simple divine martial spirit anymore. Tianyang exclaimed. The sky cloud sword was already infinitely close to a divine grade martial spirit. Now that it had devoured such a large amount of demonic chi, Tianyang wouldn't be surprised if it broke through to a higher realm. I've reached the limit. But in the next moment, Tianyang's eyes suddenly widened and emitted a resplendent light. On the heavenly sword, lines of runes shone. The demonic energy seemed to be repelled by a mysterious force and was forced to the corner of his sea of souls. At the same time, an extremely powerful aura was released from his soul sea. In an instant, everything in the surroundings was enveloped by a terrifying power that seemed to be above the entire world and pressuring the boundless galaxy. The surging demonic energy was so still that it seemed to be frozen. The burning true flames of destruction had entered Tianyang's body at this moment. As for the power of the bloodline, although it could still maintain a trace of vitality, it was still completely suppressed. If Tianyang knew about this, he would be extremely shocked. The heavenly sword's breakthrough could even suppress the immortal bloodline. The immortal bloodline was inherited from the immortal heavenly master, a great emperor in the Archean era. How powerful was the heavenly sword if it could even suppress the bloodline left by the immortal heavenly master? Unfortunately, Tianyang didn't know. At this moment, his attention was completely focused on the heavenly sword's breakthrough. The billowing demonic energy in his Sea of Souls was like a puppet being controlled by a string as it was crazily devoured by the heavenly sword. Without any resistance, it could only become the energy source for the heavenly sword's advancement. At this moment, Tianyang's eyes lit up as he circulated the divine desolate heaven spirit art with all his might. The endless Sea of Souls also began to boil at this moment. Since the heavenly sword was definitely unable to completely devour this huge amount of demonic energy, then why not use it to break through? In the next moment, Tianyang's cultivation began to rise crazily. The huge energy source that restricted Tianyang's breakthrough had been resolved. Then, Tianyang's cultivation speed would be able to display the normal level of the divine desolate heaven spirit art. That was, the speed of light increased. Rumble. Just as Tianyang was focused on breaking through, a terrifying bolt of lightning suddenly exploded above Tianyang. Shintian Wuzuan instantly felt a sense of danger. He raised his head and revealed a look of shock. How can there be lightning in the Milky Way? And it's the nine destruction golden lightning? Shintian Wuzuan's voice was hoarse as he looked at the flashing golden lightning in the sky in disbelief. Lightning tribulations were naturally divided into different levels. Ordinary lightning tribulations were ordinary lightning. Those that were slightly stronger would be destructive lightning. Even stronger would be the blood demon lightning. However, this kind of lightning was extremely rare in the myriad of worlds. As for the nine destruction golden lightning, Shantian Wuzuan, it had only appeared in the records of the great sage's breakthrough to the sage emperor tribulation in the sect. It was not 100%. Wuzuan's breakthrough had not even proven his Tao and become a sage, yet the nine destruction golden lightning that only appeared in the sage emperor tribulation appeared. For a moment, Shintian Wuzuan was completely stunned. It was not only because of the origin of the nine destruction golden lightning, but also because of the place where it appeared. There were only two possibilities for lightning to appear in the Milky Way. Lightning originally existed in this world, but Shintian Wuzuan had never seen it in the 30,000 years he had spent in the Black Underworld Soul Prison. The second possibility was the heavenly Tao had sent down lightning. However, the Milky Way itself was not a place where lightning was born. It was extremely difficult to create lightning here. Unless it was a true great tribulation, the heavenly Tao would not act. However, the heavenly Tao had acted. For the sake of Tianyang, what exactly did he break through? Shintian Wuzuan was horrified. He could not understand this youth who had come for the all-heaven sword. In terms of strength, he was no longer inferior to him. In fact, he was much stronger. In terms of talent, he was absolutely inferior. Now, the heavenly Tao had ignored all obstacles and sent down a great tribulation. According to the all-heaven sword, this youth was born in an ordinary great realm. Now, he was a youth who was not even 30 years old. Boom! Just as Shintian Wuzuan was in shock, the nine destruction golden lightning in the sky fell. It was not as shocking as Tianyang's sword that tore through the sky and severed the stars. However, it was not as if there were no ripples in the space where it passed. Instead, space had exploded, revealing the deepest layer of pitch-black darkness. The top of the Black Underworld Soul Prison was directly shattered. A golden lightning pillar blasted toward Tianyang. At this moment, a sword suddenly appeared above Tianyang's head. A sword that was completely different from the Great Void sword embryo. This is... Shintian Wuzuan revealed a look of surprise. Could this be Tianyang's hidden trump card? A sword that was even more powerful than the previous divine black sword? In the next moment, Shintian Wuzuan's eyes widened. Boom! The heavenly Tao sword met the lightning and collided with the nine destruction golden lightning. In the next moment, the martial soul's talent, the sky-devouring secret skill, was used. It swallowed the nine destruction golden lightning into its body. In Tianyang's spirit sea, a terrifying golden lightning suddenly appeared. It completely purified the demonic chi and was swallowed by the heavenly Tao sword. Boom! Another explosion. Chapter 1205. Boom! 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 The terrifying lightning that almost filled the entire Black Abyss Soul Prison exploded at this moment, illuminating the entire Black Abyss Soul Prison. The powerful demonic aura that the great Lord of Heaven had spent hundreds of thousands of years to create instantly exploded under the terrifying power of the nine destruction golden lightning. Demonic lightning was used when the demonic race broke through. Demonic lightning was extremely lethal to human cultivators. The various lightning the humans summoned when they broke through were equally terrifying to the demonic aura of the demonic race. Countless demonic aura in the Black Abyss Soul Prison was turned into nothingness under the continuous bombardment of the nine-destruction golden lightning. Uffed, Tianyang's mouth twitched, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. Even with the protection of the sky-devouring secret technique, the power of the nine-destruction golden lightning was still not to be underestimated. Body of the Dragon Emperor. Tianyang roared, and the nine refined dragon body activated. The embryonic form of the Dragon Emperor erupted. In an instant, streams of dragon chi formed a huge shield around Tianyang, blocking the nine-destruction golden lightning outside. However, the nine-destruction golden lightning did not give up. In an instant, dozens of lightning bolts weaved into a huge lightning net and fell on Tianyang. Tianyang's expression did not change. He formed a seal with both hands, and streams of devouring power erupted from his hands. Heaven-class mid-grade martial technique, sky-devouring seal. In the next moment, a terrifying vortex that seemed to be able to devour the entire Black Abyss Soul Prison formed. It caught the dozens of nine-destruction golden lightning bolts and channeled them into the sky-devouring sword, providing it with power for its breakthrough. On the surface of the Sky Cloud sword, profound and mysterious patterns suddenly appeared and shone with a white light. Its aura was also growing stronger under the refinement of the nine-destruction golden lightning. Boom! Another nine-destruction golden lightning was formed in the galaxy. However, this time, the sky-devouring sword took the initiative to attack and directly clashed with the nine-destruction golden lightning. Lightning flashed and tore through the sky. The demonic aura within hundreds of thousands of miles around the Black Abyss Soul Prison seemed to be purified by the nine-destruction golden lightning. As for the heavenly firmament sword, it was continuously absorbing the essence of the nine-destruction golden lightning and assimilating it into its body. It seemed like Tian Shao's sword was about to break through not just because of his divine martial spirit. Devil Transformation Star. In the past, the Black Underworld Soul Prison could not be seen unless one used observational martial skills or supernatural powers. But now, it was hanging above the demon star like a bright moon. Even though it was daytime, one could still see the dazzling golden lightning. The great Lord of Heaven's dark soul hell. At the center of the demonic planet, an old man spoke, his expression shaken. The heavenly demon Venerate wasn't very famous on the Demon Transformation Star. However, he was very famous among the top powerhouses on the Demon Transformation Star. In terms of strength, Wu Zun, who was at the pinnacle of the three holy paths, was no weaker than the half-step demon saint, the strongest expert on the demon planet. This kind of power was enough for the demonic star to pay attention to. Moreover, the great Lord of Heaven also had another background. He came from the demon world, the real headquarters of the demon clan in all the worlds. This kind of power should not appear on the Black Underworld Soul Prison. Even if the great Lord of Heaven wanted to study the power of the human clan, it is impossible for him to summon the tribulation lightning of the human clan. The great Lord of Heaven was a reclusive and eccentric person. He disdained to communicate with the higher-ups on the demon planet. At most, he would choose a few geniuses on the demon planet, accept them as his unofficial disciples, and let them do whatever they wanted. Therefore, even this old man, who was one of the strongest experts on the demon planet, did not know how powerful the great Lord of Heaven was. He did not know that the power of this lightning was enough to turn demon Venerable Hua Tian, who had unleashed his full power, into ashes. If he knew, he would have gone to the Black Underworld Soul Prison to check it out. However, if he went, he would only be killed by Tianyang and turned into nourishment for the heavenly firmament sword. The last strike. The immortal fire burned fiercely in Tianyang's eyes, frantically healing all the wounds on Tianyang's body. Beams of immortal power merged with Tianyang's heavenly firmament sword and slashed at the nine-shattering golden lightning. The Saint Realm Sword Dao, Myriad Dao, Life and Death Dao, Boundless Dao, and the Saint Realm Formation Dao 5 Saint Daos merged into one. The explosion of 5 Saint Daos was the limit of what Tianyang could do at the moment. After all, although the Saint Realm Pill Dao was powerful, it could not be integrated in a battle. Even the Saint Realm Formation Dao was a little difficult. However, the power of the 5 Saint Daos merged was still much stronger than the strike that killed the great Lord of Heaven. The sword had not been drawn, but the momentum was already there. A supreme sword momentum suppressed the entire black underworld soul prison. Except for Shuntian Wuzuan, all the other peak Wuzun prostrated themselves on the ground, fear on their faces. What kind of strength had this old monster, who had disguised himself as a young man, cultivated? He was clearly using the power of a peak Wuzun. Why could he even touch the Saint Realm star-breaking realm? And now, he was even stronger. The power of the 5 sacred paths was naturally much more powerful than the star-breaking sword. In the next moment, a sword light that could illuminate the entire galaxy burst out. It fiercely hit the last 9 shattering golden lightning. Boom! A deafening explosion reverberated through the entire black underworld soul prison. The aftermath of the explosion reduced the meteor that had been cut by the sword to dust. A mouthful of blood spurted out. Tianyang's figure was sent flying for hundreds of miles. He even entered the galaxy before coming to a stop. However, the last 9 shattering golden lightning also disappeared. Bits of lightning essence merged with Tianyang's blood into the heavenly firmament sword. On the heavenly firmament sword, the extremely powerful fluctuation was also released. It was powerful, but there was no pressure. However, everyone could feel the terrifying power from the origin of the primordial spirit. It seemed that this sword, which did not even have a physical body, was the strongest sword in the whole universe. It's finally over. Tianyang chuckled. He looked at the heavenly firmament sword, which was madly absorbing the demonic aura and evolving. The corners of his mouth curled up slightly. This time, he had been in seclusion for a whole year. In addition to the heavenly firmament sword's breakthrough to the divine grade martial spirit, his cultivation had also officially stepped into the peak Wuzun. Of course, it was not impossible for Tianyang to break through to the half-saint realm. However, it would be much more difficult for him to continue comprehending the Saint Dao. For Tianyang, the most important thing in this year was not the breakthrough in his genuine essence. Instead, it was the enlightenment in cultivation. Now, I have comprehended 6 Saint Daos. Then, the next step is to cultivate the legendary 3 Yuan's path to sainthood. Tianyang clenched his fists and revealed a heroic smile. The 3 Yuan's path to sainthood was the strongest path to becoming a saint in the whole universe. The genuine essence to sainthood, the physical body to sainthood, and the primordial spirit to sainthood. After Tianyang killed the 9 emperors of the Archean era, he had obtained the memories that those emperors of the Archean era had all cultivated the 3 Yuan's path to sainthood. However, the strongest of them had only cultivated 2 more Saint Daos in addition to the 3 Yuan's path to sainthood, which was equivalent to the 5 Yuan's path to sainthood. If Tianyang succeeded in cultivating the 3 Yuan's path to sainthood, it would be the 9 Saints' path to sainthood. At that time, the heavenly firmament sword would not need to go through the half-saint realm. Once it broke through, it would be the saint realm. Boom! At this moment, countless people felt an explosion in their hearts. They all looked up at the same time. A sword seemed to pierce the sky, rising vertically. The heavenly firmament sword, Saint Grade. Chapter 1206. Tianyang could no longer maintain the illusory fiend ancient book under the bombardment of the 9 shattering golden lightning. Therefore, after the heavenly sword broke through, Tianyang's original appearance was exposed to everyone's eyes. Hiss gasps could be heard in the black underworld soul prison. They had all guessed Tianyang's age, but they never thought that Tianyang's actual age would be so young. Due to his cultivation, Tianyang's aging had slowed down significantly when he was in the Dao Fire realm. After that, his cultivation had skyrocketed. As a result, Tianyang, who was almost 30 years old, still looked like a young man of 21 or 22 years old. Therefore, It was not difficult for them to calculate Tianyang's actual age. I didn't expect him to be so young, Shantian Wuzu sighed as he looked at Tianyang's face from afar. He knew Tianyang's age from the All-Heaven Sword, but he did not expect him to be so young. In the next moment, everyone in the Black Underworld Soul Prison seemed to have thought of something and fell to their knees. My lord, please lend us a helping hand. With the power of your sword to break a star, it should be easy for you to destroy a small Black Underworld Soul Prison. I'm willing to give up all my sacred artifacts, treasures, spirit stones, and crystals in exchange for my freedom. Someone shouted. In the next moment, everyone else followed suit. Some were willing to be slaves, some offered sacred artifacts, some promised to be slaves, and some came from large sects that were willing to repay with the power of their sections. There were all kinds of spirit stones, crystals, sacred crystals, fire sources, and all kinds of treasures. Obviously, very few of these Peak Wu Zun came from the same world. It was obvious how many galaxies the great Lord of Heaven had crossed in order to capture the Peak Wu Zun for cultivation. However, Tianyang had killed the great Lord of Heaven and obtained all of the great Lord of Heaven's treasures. He didn't care much about these treasures that belonged to Wu Zun. The seal of the Black Nether Soul Prison has been broken a long time ago. The Black Nether Soul Prison is nothing more than a big house floating in the galaxy. You can escape by yourselves. Tianyang spoke, and in the next moment, he pointed a finger. All of the remaining demonic energy in the Black Nether Soul Hell was devoured by the Heaven Cloud Sword. Inside the Black Nether Soul Prison, Wu Zun also sensed the obvious change. Everyone was crying tears of joy. Thank you, my lord. If I return to the lofty dragon great world, I will always remember you. My lord, these are all the treasures I have on me. I'll leave them here for you to take. Everyone was extremely grateful. Tianyang also nodded casually. He didn't really care about the lives of these Peak Wu Zun. He didn't know any of them, and it was just a matter of lifting a finger. At most, he would only lift a finger. As for the treasures, Tianyang took some casually to comfort these people's hearts. However, there were also some dissatisfied complaints among the gratitude. If you can cut a star, what's so difficult about destroying a small Black Nether Soul Prison? Help people to the end. Don't you know how to help people to the end? Really, I'm the eldest disciple of the North Sky sect. It's this guy's honor to help me. How could he let me break the prison myself? He even helped the person in front of him to the end. This kind of person's martial cultivation is just SOSO. These voices were very low, hidden in the countless cheers and gratitude. They were almost inaudible. However, Tianyang had not only cultivated his vital qi, but also used the power of the 9 destruction golden thunder to temper his body and vital spirit. No matter how soft the voices were, they could be heard clearly. Most of these complaints came from people who had been captured for less than a few thousand years. Before their edges and corners were smoothed out by the imprisonment of the great Lord of Heaven, they met Tianyang. However, Tianyang didn't care. He didn't know how many young masters like this he had met. How they reacted had nothing to do with him. Shuntian Wuzuan, holding the All-Heaven Sword, came to Tianyang. Tianyang, I can't thank you enough. When I return to the 3,000 macro worlds, I will break through to the Saint Realm as soon as possible and help you. Shuntian Wuzuan said solemnly. He was originally the youngest disciple of a famous great saint in the 3,000 macro worlds. His talent was amazing. If he hadn't met the great Lord of Heaven, he would have stepped into the Saint Realm in the past 30,000 years. Even if he was delayed for 30,000 years, it wouldn't be difficult for him to break through to the Saint Realm as soon as possible. 3,000 macro worlds? Tianyang raised his eyebrows. He knew that Shuntian Wuzuan didn't come from the Xintian macro world, but he didn't expect the name of this world to be so unique. That's right. The 3,000 macro worlds are made up of 3,000 micro worlds, so it's called the 3,000 macro worlds. Shuntian Wuzuan chuckled. If you have time, you can come to the 3,000 macro worlds and have a look. With my master's protection, you can do whatever you want in the 3,000 macro worlds. Tianyang shrugged when he heard this. When I'm free, I guess. However, you don't have to be so restrained. The All-Heaven Sword has helped me a lot. Who knows, I might even have to call you master. Tianyang smiled. Shen Tian Wuzuan quickly shook his head. I wouldn't dare. Then, I'll return to the 3,000 macro worlds first. When we meet again, I'll definitely become a saint. Divine Celestial revered martial artist laughed. Hearing this, Heavenly Sun laughed. Who knows? I might have already become a great sage. Haha, then we'll meet again. The divine heaven martial honorable laughed heartily. Then, he controlled the all heaven's swords and flew in a certain direction. At this time, Wu Zun, who was at his peak, broke through the cage that was no longer supported by demonic qi and flew out. After bowing respectfully to Tianyang, they flew back to their hometowns. Tianyang glanced at the demonic planet in the distance. The corner of his mouth curled up slightly. Then, he turned around and used the boundless 9 transformations. He stepped into the galaxy and flew toward the Xintian macro world. Xintian Wuzuan had been rescued. There were still many things to be done in the Xintian macro world. Dongxian Province, Xintian world. I, an immortality realm cultivator, have never interacted with your medicine god sect. Why do you have to invade my immortality realm today? Chen Bufan roared angrily as he looked at the medicine god sect disciple who had forcefully broken the boundary of the immortality realm's small world and charged into the immortality realm. Why? When the man heard what Suemo had said, he sneered and released the aura of a rank 8 martial honorable. That's because you have a relationship with Yang Tian. It's not just your immortality realm. Dan Sinaville and Jiang Beiqing are all the same. Suffer the wrath of the medicine god sect. In the next moment, that person punched out. A terrifying fist wind instantly exploded and blasted toward Chen Bufan. Damn it! Chen Bufan roared and punched out. Wu Zun's level 5 aura was released. However, Wu Zun was at level 5 and Wu Zun was at level 8. The outcome was certain. Boom! Chapter 12:07. Why are there so many messages? Tianyang's communication token flashed wildly as soon as he stepped into the Xintian Great Cosmos. The token itself didn't store any messages. If it couldn't receive a message, it would automatically dissipate. However, Tianyang's token was still flashing. It was obvious that someone was sending him messages. Dan Sinaville. Tianyang's eyes narrowed when he saw the 3 large words on top of it. He didn't have a very close relationship with Dan Sinaville. Dan Sinaville shouldn't have come to him when they were in danger. Either the danger was so great that a faction like Dan Sinaville had no choice but to seek help from everyone. Either that, or this threat came from the Heavenly Sun. I've offended quite a few factions. I wonder who they are. Anyway, it's good that I've killed them. I was just thinking of coming back to settle the score. Tianyang smiled faintly. In the next moment, he used the vast expanse 9 transformations, and his speed soared to the limit. If the dragons of the true dragon sacred domain saw this, they would definitely widen their eyes in disbelief. Even the heavenly dragon clan's peak martial honorables, who were known for their speed, could not compare to this speed. A murderous intent flashed in the depths of Tianyang's eyes. He hadn't caused trouble for those factions before because he didn't have the time. Otherwise, with Wu Zun's cultivation base, Tianyang could have wiped out most of the factions he had offended. Now, Tianyang hadn't gone to them yet, and they'd come knocking on his door? They were courting death. Since when did the medicine god sect have the guts to attack so many factions in a row? Compared to the immortal level cultivators whose small worlds had been breached and could only fight while fleeing, Dan Sinaville's situation was still relatively stable. After all, Tianyang, who represented Dan Sinaville, had won first place in the Myriad Pill ceremony. As a result, Dan Sinaville's factions had developed an unprecedented rate after the Myriad Pill ceremony. Although they still didn't have a saint, they had quite a few half-sages. The medicine god sect alone couldn't beat Dan Sinaville. Haha, since Dan Sinaville was stronger than immortal level cultivators, the medicine god sect had sent Wu Zun, who was a 9th level cultivator. Your alchemy saint city won first place in the Myriad Pill ceremony with a little bastard. That's one thing. After the Myriad Pill ceremony ended, you've turned a deaf ear to the medicine's offering. You looking down on us. You'll suffer a thunderous blows one day. The medicine god sect's voice, it's the medicine god, it's the medicine sect, Tianu, Zun the medicine. She had already stepped into the pill emperor realm and became a minor saint alchemist. Even the medicine god sect wouldn't want to offend a minor saint pill emperor. Moreover, he wasn't the only minor saint pill emperor in Dansinaville. After the myriad pill ceremony, Wu Qingshun had worked hard and reached the peak of the 7th level. He was only a step away from the minor saint pill emperor. Apart from that, Dansinaville now had a minor saint pill emperor. Where did the medicine god sect get their confidence from? Not only did they attack an immortal level cultivator, but they also attacked Dansinaville. We don't want to offend Dansinaville's emperor, so let me tell you something. The medicine god sect is now a member of a saint's sect. Wu Zun, the medicine god sect's 9th level cultivator, laughed. Everyone, including Jiang Lin, who was facing off against the medicine god sect on the city walls of Dansinaville, was shocked. The medicine god sect had become a saint's sect? There hadn't been any news of Banten Simeon conquering the medicine god sect recently. The old saint of the medicine god sect has come back to life. At this moment, a half-saint old man trembled as he spoke in disbelief. The main reason why the medicine god sect was able to remain as the strongest alchemy sect in the Eastern Sky Divine Land under the all-pill sacred sect was that it wasn't just a half-saint sect. There was also a saint who had been in a deep slumber since tens of thousands of years ago. The existence of a saint was like having a super weapon of mass destruction. Even if it couldn't be used normally, once it was used, it was enough to annihilate all enemies. The medicine god sect couldn't afford to offend a powerhouse who could kill a saint. That was why the medicine god sect had been free and unfettered for so many years. Come back to life? The old ancestor of the medicine god sect has never died. Wu Zun, the medicine god sect's 9th level cultivator, sneered. Jiang Lin's pupils constricted as he recalled the medicine god sect's old saint. He didn't directly admit it. However, it also meant that the medicine god sect's old ancestor had truly come back to life. With a living saint in charge, the medicine god sect was undoubtedly a saint's sect. So, is the alchemy saint city still going to put up a fight? Wu Zun, the medicine god sect's 9th level cultivator, sneered. The two half-saints beside Jiang Lin immediately retreated. The two old men cupped their fists at Jiang Lin and said apologetically, Pill Emperor Jiang, we are truly sorry. A wise man submits to circumstances. The medicine god sect has a saint in charge. It's not something Dansinaville can contend against. So, we can only take our leave. In the next moment, the two half-saints, one from the east and one from the west, fled as if they were afraid of being implicated in Dansinaville's affairs. Jiang Lin's expression turned ugly. The two half-saints were Dansinaville's greatest reliance on the medicine god sect. Now, the two half-saints had left. Dansinaville was like a fish on a chopping board, waiting to be slaughtered. Ha ha! Those two half-saints are really smart. They know about the saints. The medicine god sect's old saint? Where did this trash come from? At this moment, a contemptuous sneer suddenly sounded. Hearing this familiar voice, Jiang Lin was stunned. Then his entire body trembled. The 9th level martial saint of the medicine god sect, who had been interrupted, turned his head and looked at the source of the voice. Where did this bastard come from? How dare he? In the next moment, that person's pupils constricted, and his face was filled with shock. A ring of blood instantly appeared on his neck, causing blood to spurt out in all directions. In the next moment, his head was severed. His head was separated from his body. Did I say you could speak? Tianyang's figure stepped through the air and looked down at the crowd indifferently. In addition to Wu Zun, there were many others in the medicine god sect. The lowest was Wu Zun, who was in the 3rd stage. Since you're here, let's bury you. Tianyang chuckled. In the next moment, he stretched out his hand, and Wu Zun's true essence gathered madly. The light in Tianyang's hand bloomed like the sun and moon. Then, the light fell into the crowd of the medicine god sect. After that, there was no sound. Chapter 12:08. In the blink of an eye, The dozens of Wu Zun from the medicine god sect were reduced to ashes, completely vanishing from the sky. Jiang Lin was stunned. The two half-saints who had fled but hadn't gone far were also stunned. They weren't surprised that the medicine god sect's 9th-level Wu Zun had been killed. They could do the same. However, in just the blink of an eye, dozens of martial highnesses had died without a sound. Even they might not be able to do that. This, Jiang Lin said in disbelief. How long had it been since they last met? Was it even 2 years? Tianyang had gone from a junior who needed Dan Sinovil's protection to safely advancing in the myriad pills sacred canon to a peerless expert. That move just now was enough to break through to the peak of Wuzun. Jiang Lin, who was only a step away from the half-saint realm, admitted that he couldn't do it. Could it be that Yang Tian is already a half-saint expert? Jiang Lin said in shock. The two half-saints who'd left in the distance sneered. You already know that the medicine god sect's old saint has recovered, but you still dare to kill him? Don't think that you're the best in the world just because you killed that group of trash Wuzun. To think that Dan Sinovel has such an arrogant person. Leaving Dan Sinovel was a wise decision. The next moment, the two half-saints flew away quickly, leaving the alchemy saint city behind. It was as if Dan Sinovel had become the biggest disaster in Dongxin State. Hearing this, Jiang Lin frowned. Although the medicine god sect would eventually make a move against the alchemy saint city, the alchemy saint city was still a threat. However, there was a difference between taking action early and late. If Yang Tian were to take action and anger the medicine god sect, the medicine god sect would be in trouble. Dan Sinovel wouldn't have an easy time. Yang Tian, don't stay here for now. The medicine god sect is attacking the immortality realm in Jiangbei City. A young man suddenly rushed out and said hurriedly, Jin Daoping? Tianyang raised his eyebrows and nodded slightly. In the next moment, he released the power of his primordial spirit. Although the immortality realm and Jiangbei City were extremely far away from Dan Sinovel, Tianyang's primordial spirit had been tempered by the ninefold destruction golden lightning. His eyes was 10 times larger than before. Therefore, even if they were very far away, Tianyang's eyes, he could still sense the immortality realm and Jiangbei City situation. Jiangbei City. Tianyang zest. SSSSS. Of A's. In the sky above Jiangbei City, there were only 2 martial venerables. They were laughing as they suppressed the entire city. No one in Jiangbei City had been killed yet. However, the patriarchs and heads of the major families, as well as the mayor of Jiangbei City, were all vomiting blood. They were severely injured. This time, the sect master is furious. He destroyed all the forces related to Yang Tian. Jiangbei City may be small, but it has a close relationship with Yang Tian. Let's relax a little. One of the Wu Zuns chuckled. Wu Zuns, although he was powerful, he was just an ordinary cannon fodder in a force like the medicine god sect. If they went to Dan Sinovel, there might be casualties among the immortality realm cultivators. However, it would be easy to slaughter a small Jiangbei City. It's been a long time since I've killed so happily. I wonder if killing millions of people will make me happier. One of them sneered. In the next moment, Wu Zun's true essence was released. Meanwhile, millions of people in Jiangbei City were in despair. They didn't expect that they would suffer such an unexpected disaster just because they provoked the Tianyang. Millions of people being killed might not feel good, but to Wu Zun's death is very satisfying. At this moment, a chuckle suddenly sounded in the Wu Zun's ears. Wu Zun's expression changed drastically. Who is it? He released his primordial spirit power, but it was firmly suppressed. Even if he could scan a mile around him, he couldn't find the person who spoke. It's the person who killed you. That chuckle sounded again. In the next moment, a terrifying primordial spirit sword pierced through space and ruthlessly stabbed into their souls. 2 Wu Zuns were not even ants to the Tianyang. If they weren't separated by tens of millions of miles, a casual glance from the Tianyang would be enough to make them bleed from all orifices and die. But now, the 2 Wu Zuns weren't any better. Their souls were instantly breached. The pupils of the 2 Wu Zuns eyes became unfocused. Their bodies went limp and turned into lifeless organic matter, falling from a height of 30,000 meters. Smack! They smashed into pieces. Below, countless Jiangbei City citizens were dumbfounded when they saw this scene. Wu Zun's cultivation was almost omnipotent. He was strong enough to dominate the entire East Sea state. But now he was dead? Immortality realm. It's much more comfortable if the distance is shorter. A chuckle suddenly resounded through the entire battlefield. The Immortality Realm cultivators who had to fight to the death with the Medicine God sect because their hidden stronghold had been discovered were all stunned. The Immortality Realm First Elder, who had lost an arm because of the battle, instantly recognized the voice. It was Yang Tian, who had charged into the Songhai sect alone and came out unscathed. He had even made the Songhai sect submit to him. It's Big Brother Yang. Chen Bufan, who was heavily injured but still had to fight, widened his eyes in ecstasy. He's finally here. Wu Zun, who was at the peak of 8th stage, raised an eyebrow when he heard this. Yang Tian? He's finally willing to come out? That's true. After seeing me use the power of the Sect Master to kill your Immortality Realm leader and heavily injure your Immortality Realm First Elder, he probably thought that the Medicine God sect had run out of tricks. But he's come at the right time. Wu Zun's face suddenly revealed a savage smile. Light flashed in his hand, and a talisman appeared in it. Sect Master, I prepared 3 strength talismans for today's battle. Now I'll give you one. Boom. Before he could finish his sentence, the rank 8 Martial Honorable Realms Sect Leader Seal in his hand exploded. The peak of the rank 8 Martial Honorable Realm and all the Medicine God sect disciples had been reduced to ashes. However, the strange thing was that even though the Immortality Realm disciples were close by, they weren't hurt at all. This? Chen Bufan's eyes widened. What's going on? Why did the main culprit that caused the Immortality Realm disciples to be defeated suddenly explode in this guy's hand? I can't be bothered to talk nonsense with you. Tianyang's voice rang out again. In the next moment, everyone felt something. The invisible pressure above their heads receded like the tide. The Immortality Realm First Elder's eyes narrowed as he realized something. Yang Tian didn't come at all. Dan Sinaville. Zhang Lin looked at Tian Yang in front of him in disbelief, extremely shocked. He clearly saw Tian Yang standing in the same spot, motionless. However, the communication token was filled with news of Yang Tian's appearance and the victory of killing the enemy. Yang Tian's primordial spirit power has already reached such a terrifying level. Chapter 1209. He stood in place, but decided the outcome of the battle tens of millions of miles away. Although Dan Sinaville and Jiangbei City had no connection, Zhang Lin was certain that the crisis in Jiangbei City had been resolved. Otherwise, even the immortal stage Wu Zun had died. Jiangbei City didn't even have a 3rd stage Wu Zun. How could it not be resolved? Done. Tian Yang said flatly. He could deal with a few martial honored realm experts, even if they had the peak Sage-to-Be rune seal in their hands. Tian Yang didn't feel much of a sense of accomplishment after killing several hundred cultivators. The Medicine God sect used to have an old saint who was in a deep slumber. Has that old saint awakened? Is that why the Medicine God sect is so confident that they can ignore Bantin Simun's decree and attack the immortal stage cultivators in Dan Sinaville and Jiangbei City? Tian Yang said. He'd heard this from few people before, but he still wanted to confirm it. The corners of his mouth curled up into a faint smile. That's right. Zhang Lin nodded, his heart trembling as he looked at the smiling Tian Yang. Tian Yang wasn't going to cause trouble for the Medicine God sect, was he? Even if the Medicine God sect's old saint wasn't dead, he'd be old and gravely injured. But if he could wake up from his hibernation, he must have recovered a lot. And now, Tian Yang was going to cause trouble for the Medicine God sect? The might of a saint, that's fine. Before Zhang Lin could say anything else, Tian Yang used the Heaven's Expanse 9 transformations and disappeared. Zhang Lin had no choice but to swallow his last sentence. Looking at Tian Yang's disappearing figure, he let out a sigh. He hoped that Tian Yang could return safely. Otherwise, if the Medicine God sect could come once, they could come twice or even thrice. Without Tianyang, Dan Sineville wouldn't be able to withstand a second or third time. My 10,000 Mammoth Annihilation, which combined 4 Sage Daos, already had the might of a saint. I didn't use the 10,000 Mammoth Annihilation when I combined the 5 Sage Daos, but I could still break the final 9 shattering Golden Lightning. I wonder what would happen if I used the 10,000 Mammoth Annihilation against the Medicine God Sect's Old Saint. Tianyang quickly flew towards the eastern sky, divine continent. The corners of his mouth hooked up into a smile. The 10,000 Mammoth Annihilation's terrifying might was his greatest trump card. Of course. Who knew how long he was facing an old saint who had just of awakening? Just nice. My strength has improved tremendously, and I need a sage to test it out. Tianyang smiled. He had a premonition that this trip would absolutely shock the entire continent. Yang Tian has appeared. Although Tianyang's detonation had killed most of the Medicine God Sect's disciples, Tianyang still hadn't fully recovered. The immortal level powerhouses then attacked and killed the remaining disciples. However, there were always a few disciples who found the opportunity to spread the news. At this moment, the Medicine God Sect Master's expression was extremely ugly as he read the message on his communication token. Ever since the Myriad Pill sacred ceremony ended, Yang Tian has been nowhere to be seen. I thought he'd left the Eastern Divine Land, but he's still in the eastern part of the Profound Sky Plane. He even killed Sha Lei, Guer, and the rest of the Medicine God Sect's upper echelons. The Medicine God Sect Master asked himself, but he didn't hide the cold, killing intent in his words. Wu Zun was a 4th-level realm cultivator. He was undoubtedly cannon fodder in the Medicine God Sect. However, Wu Zun was a peak 8th-level realm cultivator, while Wu Zun was a 9th-level realm cultivator. They were the cornerstones of the Medicine God Sect, the true elites of the sect. The death of one of them was enough to make the Medicine God Sect's heart ache for half a year. Now Tianyang had appeared and killed 2 of them, as well as a bunch of other Medicine God Sect disciples. This Yang Tian is so arrogant. He didn't obediently commit suicide or give up his nascent spirit in front of our Medicine God Sect. The old man on the side said hoarsely. The Medicine God School's sect master's expression changed when he heard that. Lord Ancestor, this Yang Tian is just a reckless little genius who doesn't know what's good for him just because he has some talent. The only reason we didn't kill him immediately was because of Banten Simeon's protection. Also, this kid disappeared without a trace as soon as the Myriad Pill sacred ceremony ended. Now that you've recovered and this brat has appeared, we naturally have to kill him, said the Medicine God Sect Master. The withered old man nodded slightly. Then, he closed his eyes as if he was an old man who was on the verge of death and had no energy left in him. However, none of the Medicine God Sect executives present dared to treat this old man as a real old man. This was the man who had founded the Medicine God Sect for tens of thousands of years, the man who had once shaken the entire Eastern Divine Land, the Medicine God Sect's venerable ancestor. Not only was his pill Tao powerful, but his martial Tao was also frightening. Otherwise, how could the Medicine God Sect have dared to act so arrogantly, ignoring Banten Simeon's protection and attacking Tianyang's faction as soon as they recovered? Then, who should we send next? Asked the Medicine God Sect Master coldly. To be able to kill Wu Zun and Wu Zun, who was a peak 8th-level realm cultivator, his strength was on par with any peak Wu Zun in the Medicine God Sect. If they wanted to kill Tianyang, they would need a half-saint. The Medicine God Sect only had 2 half-saints, including the Medicine God Sect Master. The 3 of us will go. However, before the remaining half-saint could speak, 3 old men near the head of the table stood up. Their faces were white, and their eyes were like those of eagles, flickering with a sinister aura. The auras of peak Wu Zun were released from their bodies, and they intertwined and merged in the air as if they were one. The 3 ghost elders? The Medicine God Sect Master raised an eyebrow. The 3 of you? That's right. No matter how strong that Yang Tian is, he's just a junior. How could a junior step into the half-saint realm? He's just a little bastard who relied on some method to enter the half-saint realm. The three of us together have the power to fight a half-saint. It's naturally easy to deal with a puny young Tian. The leader of the three dark shade elders sneered. His eyes were full of arrogance and contempt. The three ghost elders became famous 3,000 years ago. They killed 10 Peak Wuzun and severely injured a beginner half-saint. Their name shook the Eastern Divine Continent. The Medicine God sect was only able to recruit these three into the sect by chance. Great! With the three ghost elders taking action, there's no need to consider Yang Tian. Immediately, someone revealed a smile. At this moment, a laugh suddenly came from the horizon. 3 Peak Wuzun. Hearing this, the Medicine God sect master's expression didn't change, but the Medicine God sect master's expression suddenly changed. As for the three ghost elders, they were also slightly stunned. However, in the next moment, the Medicine God sect master's pupils constricted and his eyes widened in anger. The aura of a saint erupted. However, it was still a step too late. A sword glow descended from above, slashing the entire hall in half. The black flames burned fiercely, destroying the hall, and the three ghost elders who had just stood up. At this moment, Chapter 12:10. A single slash had killed the three dark shade elders. The crowd didn't even have the time to be stunned. Another sword light slashed down from the sky. What's going on? Some people still didn't understand what was going on. They froze on the spot as they watched the resplendent beam of sword light descend. It was as if they were hallucinating. The beam of sword light was about to slaughter a few more Wuzun realm experts of the Medicine God sect. A furious roar suddenly rang out. Yang Tian, how dare you? In the next moment, the aura of a peak half-saint erupted, instantly forming a protective shield that blocked the beam of sword light. However, even though it blocked the attack, the beam of sword light still cut a hole in it. The remaining shockwaves completely destroyed the already messy hall. The main hall of the Medicine God sect was reduced to nothingness in a mere 3 seconds. The Medicine God sect master, who blocked the attack, was both shocked and furious. He looked on in disbelief. He never imagined that Tianyang would be so audacious. He knew that the Medicine God sect had a saint awakening and was about to dominate the Eastern Sky Divine Land with the Banten Simian. He even dared to attack. The moment he attacked, he destroyed their main hall and killed the 3 Dark Shade Elders. In terms of value, the 3 Dark Shade Elders were worth more than the 9th layer Wuzun that Tianyang had killed 10 times over. Just by working together, they had the strange ability to fight half-saints. In the past 3,000 years, the Medicine God sect had gained a lot of benefits. Now it was all gone. Die! The Medicine God sect master roared. He didn't care how Tianyang had done it before and directly charged forward. Light flashed in his hand, and a huge pill cauldron that would take 3 people to wrap around it was summoned. Immediately after, a yellow halo bloomed from the cauldron. Earth Spirit Cauldron, suppress. The Medicine God sect master roared. The power of a peak half-saint instantly erupted from his body. The picturesque microcosm of the Medicine God sect was now completely shattered by the terrifying power of a peak half-saint. Even the barrier between the Medicine God sect's minor world and the Xiantian major world was trembling. From the outside, one could already see what was happening inside. With a single strike, the spatial barrier trembled. The peak of the half-saint realm was so terrifying. Tianyang was the first to bear the brunt of the suppression, which was much stronger than the surrounding environment. It's all right. Tianyang only felt that his body was as heavy as lead. Even lifting a finger was extremely difficult. Those who could become half-saints had cultivated at least one saint path. The sect master of the Medicine God School had been able to dominate the Eastern Divine Prefecture for so many years, so he must have cultivated more than one path. It seemed that what he cultivated was the Tao of alchemy of the Sage realm and the Tao of the earth. However, the current me has no use for it. Tianyang shrugged. He was going to cultivate the path of 3 Yuans to sainthood. There was no room for the Tao of the earth to cultivate. Furthermore, the Tao of the earth, boom, roar. A deafening dragon's roar rang out, accompanied by the sound of something shattering. In the next moment, a huge dragon appeared on Tianyang's body. It was formed entirely from the terrifying draconic power of the Dragon Emperor body. This dragon's strength was probably not much weaker than the true dragon sacred domains by Pengyu and Lanji. It was a move used against a peak half-saint. Naturally, it was easy. The rings of earth and light that surrounded Tianyang and tried to suppress Tianyang were instantly shattered by the dragon's draconic power. In the next moment, the dragon erupted with terrifying speed and charged toward the medicine god sect master. How is this possible? The sect master's expression changed drastically. He was a peak half-saint, and just now he had used the spiritual earthen cauldron, a peak half-saint artifact, to unleash the earth suppression art. But this unknown dragon breaker technique had instantly broken it? So that's what you're relying on? The true essence Tianyang released was at the level of peak Wuzun. The difference between that and peak half-saint was like heaven and earth. How could a peak Wuzun possibly shatter a peak half-saint's move? It must be Tianyang using the trump card he used to instantly kill the 3 ghoul elders. Then, I'm sorry, but today you can only die. The sect master smiled savagely. He controlled the spiritual earthen cauldron and smashed it down on the dragon's draconic power. Boom! With a loud bang, the dragon's draconic power shattered. The sect master's expression became incomparably arrogant. As expected, now get ready to boom. At this moment, a muffled sound came from behind the sect master. The sect master trembled and turned his head in disbelief. A simple, unadorned fist landed on the sect master's back. When did you? The medicine god sect master only managed to spit out 5 words before he coughed up a mouthful of blood to replace the rest of his words. As for the sect master himself, he was sent flying by this punch. How is this possible? Seeing this, the countless medicine god sect disciples below all paled. The sect master was only 10,000 years old and had already stepped into the peak half-saint realm. He was only one opportunity away from the true saint realm. His talent was extraordinary, and his talent in alchemy was even greater. Even the revived medicine god patriarch might not be as talented as the sect master. To the countless medicine god sect disciples, the sect master was a godlike existence. But now his attack had been broken, his mouth was spitting out blood, and he was sent flying. All of a sudden, the disciples of the medicine god sect felt their faith crumble. This is a peak half-saint. Tianyang raised an eyebrow. The ease with which he dealt with the sect master had far exceeded his expectations. Although part of the reason was because the medicine god school sect master had underestimated his opponent as a veteran expert. Even if he did underestimate his opponent, he wouldn't underestimate his opponent too much. However, Tianyang was still able to break through the medicine god sect master's attack and send him flying with a punch. If the Heavenly Dragon Clan's half-saint by Jiju were to fight against the current Tianyang, he probably wouldn't even have an intact corpse. A bit weak, Tianyang muttered to himself. But as soon as he said this, the entire medicine god sect's pocket world fell silent. The sect master of the medicine god sect was weak? Good. At this moment, the withered old man who'd been silent all this time suddenly raised his head and laughed. In the next moment, his figure disappeared from his seat. Immediately after, Tianyang sensed a deadly and terrifying power coming at him from the side. Tianyang tilted his head to the side. A gust of fist wind brushed past Tianyang's face and slammed into a towering mountain in the distance. Boom! The mountain was reduced to dust. Chapter 12:11. A casual strike had turned a mountain into dust. Tianyang's expression turned serious. He was confident, but that didn't mean he was arrogant. He knew what kind of opponent he could kill easily and what kind of opponent he had to treat with caution. Sage Realm. Although Half-Saint had the word sage in it, it was a completely different world from the Sage Realm in terms of power. Even if there was only a small gap between the two realms, it was a huge gap. One step back was mortal, and the next step was to become a Sage Realm expert. There were many peak half-saints who could fight Wuzun, but these peak Wuzun couldn't even withstand a single blow from a true Sage Realm expert. But now, the medicine god Sex awakened patriarch, a sage realm expert, had made his move. You destroyed my medicine god Sex main hall right in front of me, killed 3 of my medicine god Sex honorary elders, and even sent my medicine god Sex sect master flying? Even in 9 universes, Saint Emperor wasn't as arrogant as you. The withered old man stood less than 10 meters in front of Tianyang, but there was no light in his eyes. It was as if the person in front of Tianyang wasn't a person, but an old corpse already buried in the ground. However, Tianyang wasn't stupid enough to take the old man in front of him for an old corpse. He sensed an aura from the old man that was somewhat similar to his own. It was similar to the Tao of life and death, the Tao of decay. It was similar to the Tao of destruction, but much stranger and more difficult to deal with. The 9 universes Saint Emperor? Countless people below were stunned when they heard the name. Who in the Xintian great world didn't know of the 9 universes Saint Emperor? He was an ordinary genius who had suddenly defied the heavens and dominated the world. 3,000 years ago, his old injuries had flared up, and he died because of his obsession. The Saint Emperor was the strongest person in the Xintian great world. The medicine god Sex patriarch actually knew the 9 universes Saint Emperor. Tianyang's eyes flashed with surprise. Before the 9 universes Saint Emperor had stepped into the heavens expanse Saint Palace, he was indeed an ordinary genius. However, 10,000 years ago, when the medicine god Sex patriarch had been active, the 9 universes Saint Emperor was already a great saint, even if he had not stepped into the Saint Emperor stage. Did the medicine god Sex, old ancestor, really know the 9 universes Saint Sovereign? Back then, the 9 universes Saint Emperor, as a half-saint, barged into a saint's sect and killed 3 peak stage Wuzun before leaving. The medicine god Sex patriarch spoke. Hearing this, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It turned out that even the medicine god gate ancestor didn't know the 9 universes Saint Sovereign. 9 universes Saint Emperor? Who does he think he is? Brat, this young master believes in you. In the future, if you aren't as awesome as the 9 universes Saint Emperor, you'll have to broadcast yourself drinking my bath water. Just as everyone was shocked by the 9 universes Saint Emperor, the little golden girl's voice suddenly echoed in Tianyang's mind. The corners of Tianyang's mouth twitched. Bathwater? You're an artifact spirit. When have you ever taken a bath? Drinking air? However, Tianyang's state of mind had calmed down. The person in front of him was just a withered saint. Tianyang had used him as a whetstone to sharpen his skills. However, the 9 universes Saint Emperor only dared to barge into a saint's sect when the saint was out in seclusion. Yet, you dared to kill the people of the saint's sect right in front of the saint when he had just awakened. The medicine god Sex patriarch said in a low voice. In the next moment, a strange yellow beam of light suddenly shot out. It didn't give Tianyang any time to react and arrived in front of Tianyang. I've been prepared for this. Tianyang smiled as the great void sword embryo in his hand glowed brightly. The holy grade martial spirit, Skycloud sword, was unleashed. In the next moment, a mysterious fluctuation was released from Tianyang's body, slowing down the speed of the yellow beam of light. Next, Tao of life and death, opposite shore flower bloom, Tianyang slashed out with his sword. It was as if a poignant flower had bloomed on the lifeless beam of light. The beautiful slash forcefully split the yellow beam of light in half. He actually reacted? Seeing this, the medicine god Sex patriarch raised an eyebrow in surprise. However, his expression quickly turned murderous. But you still have to die. In the next moment, the medicine god Sex patriarch disappeared. Tianyang's heart skipped a beat as he unleashed the vast expanse 9 transformations. The 4th transformation of the vast expanse, 9 transformations, shifting change. Tianyang's figure disappeared as well. In the next moment, a strange mark appeared where Tianyang had been standing. A yellow light flashed on the mark. Everything in the surroundings was wiped out by the mark. What's going on? Even the medicine god Sex disciples on the ground withered away in an instant, turning into white-haired old men. Their life auras also rapidly declined, as if they had truly aged. Quite a fast reaction, but you're still just a little mouse. Seeing that his attack had missed, the medicine god Sex Patriarch walked out of the void and raised an eyebrow. However, his expression didn't change in the slightest. He looked at the solemn Tian Yang in the distance and sneered. His true energy surged out wildly. A terrifying, withering force filled the entire medicine god Sex minor world. Everything in the surroundings seemed to be dyed with a layer of yellow. All life seemed to have disappeared in an instant. The medicine god Sex Patriarch smiled faintly, then raised his hand and extended his index finger. Withering finger! In the blink of an eye, apart from the medicine god Sex disciples, all life was extinguished. When my flower blooms, 100 flowers die. The terrifying power of withering and decay contained within this finger had already reached a terrifying level that could destroy an entire small world. However, under the medicine god Sex Patriarch's control, this withering force only managed to kill off all life except for the medicine god Sex disciples. The medicine god Sex disciples, on the other hand, were completely unharmed. This is the Patriarch's power. Seeing this, the medicine god Sex elders were ecstatic. Possessing such a powerful force, yet still being able to control it perfectly, this was the Saint Realm. The Withering Finger has killed 3,000 peak Wuzun, 500 half-saints, and even 3 half-saints who were infinitely close to becoming a true saint. The medicine god Sex Patriarch spoke indifferently, his gaze not on Tianyang. To be able to take on my Withering Finger as a peak Wuzun, you must have accumulated the good fortune of 3 lifetimes. A disdainful and contemptuous voice slowly echoed through the world. Hearing this, the medicine god Sex Patriarch revealed mocking expressions. So what if he could defeat the medicine god Sex Patriarch, a peak half-saint? In front of the medicine god Sex Patriarch, a true saint, he would only be killed in an instant. The Tao of Withering? Interesting. It's similar to the Tao of Destruction, but also closely related to the Tao of Death. At this moment, a sudden evaluation was heard. Everyone's pupils shrank, and their bodies trembled as they hurriedly looked toward the source of the voice. Instantly, their pupils shrank. A figure with strange flames burning all over his body stood proudly in the sky. He looked like an ancient god. The Withering Finger from before seemed to have no effect on him at all. Unfortunately for you, though, the corner of Tianyang's mouth curled up, revealing a trace of a smile. The only part of his body that had been corroded by the Tao of Withering was his hand. At this moment, under the burning of the undying flame, it was rapidly recovering. Heaven and earth may perish, but I will not. The sun and moon may decay, but I will not. Chapter 12:12. The Immortal Bloodline and the Immortal Divine Body. The corners of Tianyang's mouth lifted slightly, revealing a faint smile. The Tao of Decay was indeed strange and powerful, and extremely difficult to deal with. Tianyang had already tensed his mind to the limit, but he still couldn't dodge the Withering Finger's attack. Fortunately, the Withering Finger was mostly made up of the Holy Path energy. There wasn't much true yuan in it, so after dispersing the Holy Path energy of the Tao of Decay, it was no longer lethal. Tianyang just so happened to have the immortal bloodline and cultivated the Tao of life and death. Just the Tao of life and death alone was enough to suppress the Tao of decay, not to mention the immortal divine body. The Withering Finger is actually, seeing this, the medicine god Sex Patriarch's eyes narrowed in shock. The medicine god Sex Patriarch was well aware of the power of his Withering Finger. There was something he hadn't said before. A saint had once fallen under the Withering Finger. So what if you blocked the Withering Finger? This old man can crush you into ashes with just his true essence. The medicine god Sex Patriarch snorted. His figure flashed, and in the blink of an eye, he was right in front of Tianyang. The Tao of Decay and True Yuan merged into one, condensing on his fist as he punched at Tianyang's face. Boom! A loud sound rang out, and the medicine god Sex Patriarch's eyes narrowed. A long sword had appeared between his fist and the sky sun at some point in time. The sharp edge of the sword was about to sever his fingers. What fast sword! The medicine god Sex Patriarch's face darkened. Looking at the blood spurting out of his fist, his figure flashed. In the next moment, as he dodged, an overbearing and ferocious seal shot out. Sword of 9 Desolation. Tianyang smiled indifferently and slashed out with his sword. The undying divine flame burned fiercely. With one slash, the withering force on the seal was neutralized, and the seal itself couldn't withstand a single blow. With one slash, the saint's attack was instantly neutralized. How is this possible? Seeing this, the medicine god sect master, who had just recovered, shouted in disbelief, his pupils shrinking. That was the old ancestor of the medicine god gate. He was the medicine god sect's old ancestor, who led a group of alchemists from tens of thousands of years ago to establish the medicine god sect. Even though he had yet to reach the great saint realm, he was still strong enough to kill anyone below the saint realm. But now Wu Zun, who was at his peak, had shattered his attack. This sword is a saint weapon. Moreover, it's not an ordinary sacred artifact. The medicine god sect patriarch had a greedy look on his face as he stared at the great void sword embryo in Tianyang's hand. With his eyesight, he recognized the grade of the great void sword embryo at the first moment of collision. The next few attacks made the medicine god sect's patriarch even more greedy for the Taishu sword embryo. A holy weapon was hard to come by. Moreover, the great void sword embryo was much more powerful than a holy weapon with the help of the divine grade martial soul, the Tian Shao sword. A treasure like this could only be found by chance. For such a treasure to fall into the hands of an ant like you is an insult to its glory. Only in my hands can this holy weapon unleash its true power. The medicine god sect patriarch laughed maniacally. In the next moment, his figure flashed, and he appeared in front of Tianyang. Unparalleled holy fist. Boundless chi erupted from the medicine god sect patriarch's body. It was as if the medicine god sect patriarch wasn't just an alchemist, but a martial saint realm cultivator. That's right, the medicine god sect patriarch had cultivated both alchemy and martial arts. Moreover, to be able to establish himself in the prosperous and chaotic Easter Divine Prefecture, martial arts was the orthodox path. The medicine god sect patriarch was first a martial saint, then a pill saint. Even if the 4 elders of the Dragon Mountain were to block this punch, they would only be defeated in an instant. Interesting. Seeing this, Tianyang raised an eyebrow and smirked. In the next moment, with a flick of his wrist, the great void sword embryo let out a ferocious roar. 10,000 mammoths annihilation. In that instant, the 4 holy paths merged into one. With the holy sword Tao as the foundation, the Tao of life and death, the Tao of boundless, and the Tao of 10,000 mammoths as the main body, the sword suddenly bloomed. It erupted with an incomparably terrifying sword light. The sword light was like the clouds in the sky, vast and difficult to find, but as majestic and powerful as a mountain. Under this sword, it seemed like everything in the world would be destroyed. This power. Seeing this, the medicine god sect patriarch's expression changed drastically. This power had exceeded the limits of his imagination. In his opinion, even if Tianyang controlled a powerful treasure that was close to a great saint artifact, with Wu Zun's true yuan at his peak, it was already the limit for him to use an attack at the peak of the half-saint level. Facing a saint head-on would mean certain death. However, even the patriarch of the medicine god sect could sense the threat of this sword strike. His heart beat wildly, not only because of excitement, but also because of fear. A holy realm expert, the medicine god sect patriarch, was terrified. I don't believe that a peak Wu Zun can use such a powerful move. At the same time, the medicine god sect's ancestor roared die. Boom! A supreme fist mark bloomed from the medicine god sect patriarch's hand and collided with the destructive sword light. Energy ripples visible to the naked, eyes surged in all directions like a raging storm. In an instant, The translucent spatial barrier was completely shattered by the Medicine God Sect Patriarch's attack. The Medicine God Sect minor world, drifting outside the Shantian major world, fell into the Shantian major world. Immediately, the abundant spiritual chi of heaven and earth in the Medicine God Sect minor world scattered wildly. The Medicine God Sect Patriarch's pupil shrank, as if he had gone mad. The Medicine God Sect had spent tens of thousands of years accumulating the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It was akin to paradise. But now, because of Tianyang, it had escaped. If they wanted to recover, not only would they have to reconstruct the spatial barrier, but they would also have to spend tens of thousands of years to gather it again. One sword strike had almost destroyed the Medicine God Sect's 10,000 years of foundation. Little bastard, die! The Medicine God Sect Patriarch roared madly as his fist mark grew stronger and stronger. However, Tianyang's lips curled into a smirk. An evil glint flashed in his eyes. I can't be bothered to play with you. Tianyang chuckled as the great void sword embryo in his hand flashed with white light. In the next moment, a terrifying, devouring force erupted from Tianyang's hand. What are you doing? The Medicine God Sect Patriarch's expression changed. How could this devouring force even devour his attack? However, in the next moment, the Medicine God Sect Patriarch was completely stunned. His face turned pale, and he couldn't even speak. Martial soul latent talent, devour the sky. Tianyang's aura also disappeared as he chuckled. Chapter 12:13. Half-Sage. The Medicine God Sect's Patriarch's expression changed drastically. He looked at Tianyang in horror. What had just happened? Tianyang, who'd been Wu Zun at his peak, had stepped into the half-sage realm in the next second. He hadn't even needed time to prepare. Was he hiding his strength from the beginning? The Medicine God Sect's Patriarch screamed inwardly, but he quickly dismissed that thought. Half-sage. Even a half-sage who could go head-to-head with a sage like him was still only a half-sage. If Tianyang was a half-sage, then even with layers of disguise, the Medicine God Sect's Patriarch would still be able to see through Tianyang's strength. It had nothing to do with the level of disguise. In front of a sage, all existences below the sage realm would be exposed. All disguises were useless. Even the illusory fiend tome couldn't hide from a sage's gaze. In other words, Tianyang really had only been a peak Wu Zun before. A peak Wu Zun stepped into the half-sage realm in an instant. Even the strongest secret method I've heard of can't do that. Secret methods that could instantly increase one's strength existed in the Shantian Great World as well. However, most of them were useful for those below the Wu Zun realm. Once a half-sage stepped into the realm of the sage, their power would be close to zero. They were completely useless against sages and half-sages. However, Tianyang had a secret method that could allow him to step into the realm of the half-sage. If he took it out, the entire Shantian Great World would go crazy over it. To step into the half-sage realm meant that one had touched upon the sage realm. That meant that it was very likely to be useful even to a sage. In the blink of an eye, the fear in the Medicine God Sect's Patriarch's eyes turned into boundless greed. It was even more intense than when he'd first discovered the power of the sword embryo. A secret method that could even be useful to a sage. There is no need to even think about how valuable it would be. Kid, die! The Medicine God Sect's Patriarch roared. In an instant, boundless saintly power erupted from his body and mercilessly blasted at the heavenly sun. That punch contained the power of the Tao of decay, the Tao of pills, and the Tao of space. Even the space around them was shattered. Even the city that was hundreds of miles away seemed to be affected by this punch. Countless people's faces were pale as their life force was taken away by this fist strike. Interesting. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows. For the Medicine God Sect's Patriarch to be able to establish such a foundation, he must be extremely powerful. No matter how he thought about it, it was impossible for him to be as embarrassing as the sect master of the Medicine God Sect, who had only mastered 2 saint paths. From the looks of it, the Medicine God Gate's Patriarch had mastered the Tao of space, the Tao of Pill Sage, and the Tao of decay. Before this, Tianyang had refrained from using the sky-devouring secret art because he was wary of the medicine god gate's ancestors' hidden trump card. But now, that trump card had been exposed. The initiative had completely fallen into the hands of Tianyang. Flying immortal sword, Tianyang snorted. The great void sword in his hand flashed and shot out like a meteor. The terrifying power of the sword Tao of the Saint Realm wreaked havoc in the surroundings. An unstoppable force seemed capable of piercing through the heavens and earth. In an instant, it pierced through the medicine god gate's ancestor's fist. The incomparably sturdy true essence defense was no stronger than tofu in front of the flying immortal sword. Even the medicine god gate's physical body, which had been tempered by true essence for tens of thousands of years, couldn't withstand Tianyang's attack. His cultivation had reached the half-step Saint Realm. It wasn't just a change in the quantity of true essence. Instead, it was a qualitative change that led to a qualitative leap in strength. Looking at his bleeding fist, the medicine god gate's ancestor's expression finally changed. Deep fear appeared on his face. He finally understood that he was no longer the medicine god gate's ancestor who could look down on anyone below the Saint Realm, the martial pill saint of the Eastern Divine Prefecture. Instead, he was a weakling who could be killed by Tianyang at any time. Run! The medicine god gate's ancestor roared. In the next moment, he turned around and charged back. It was all thanks to Tianyang's previous attack that the medicine god gate's minor world's barrier had been destroyed. Otherwise, it wouldn't have been so easy for the medicine god gate's ancestor to escape. Of course, that was only as simple as he imagined. Down below, the countless disciples of the medicine god sect turned deathly pale as they watched the medicine god sect patriarch make the decision to flee. Then, their hearts turned to ashes. The medicine god gate's ancestor, who had once dominated the Eastern Divine Prefecture, had fled. He'd abandoned the medicine god gate's enormous foundation and fled. You want to run? Tianyang's smile widened. A playful glint flashed through his eyes. In the next moment, he used the 9 transformations. Boundless Tao, boundless 9 transformations. In the blink of an eye, the entire sky was covered by Tianyang's afterimages. Tianyang's figure was also incomparably close to the medicine god gate's ancestor. How did you catch up? Seeing this, the medicine god gate's ancestor was horrified. Disbelief was written all over his face. He couldn't beat Tianyang in a head-on battle. Even his speed was slower than Tianyang's. As for the medicine god school's sect master, he was already dumbfounded. He hadn't died not because Tianyang wasn't strong enough, but because he hadn't even used his full strength. If someone like the medicine god gate's ancestor could force him to flee, wouldn't killing him be as easy as pie? Stop it. I can give you whatever you want. Seeing the great void sword embryo in Tianyang's hand becoming sharper and sharper, the medicine god gate's ancestor trembled and screamed at Tianyang. The medicine god gate could be destroyed, but he, the medicine god gate's ancestor, could not die. Oh! Tianyang raised an eyebrow and chuckled. What do you have? The medicine god gate. The entire medicine god gate, including its countless inheritances and all of its properties, can be given to you. The medicine god gate's ancestor roared madly, his voice trembling. Tianyang's lips curled up. What else? Tianyang smiled. The medicine god gate's ancestor was stunned. What else? He couldn't take out anything else. That's all. Tianyang chuckled. Then use your life. In the next moment, Tianyang's figure suddenly disappeared. The true origin of the Sage-to-Be realm was completely unleashed. Damn it. Seeing this, the medicine god gate's ancestor's expression changed drastically. He roared and unleashed his saint-level true energy. However, Tianyang's sword easily shattered it. This time, Tianyang wouldn't hold back. A cold light flashed in his eyes. Massacre Domain, unleashed. Body of the Dragon Emperor, unleashed. Saint-level, Sword Tao, Life and Death Tao, Myriad Sacred Tao, Boundless Tao, Sage Durate Tao, 5 Sacred Taos, all unleashed. Myriad Annihilation. Heavenly Sun roared and slashed down with his sword. Sword Light for Radiances. Chapter 12:14. Taking 2 days off from middle school exams. Chapter 12:15. A saint had died with a single strike. The saint's blood was scattered all over the sky like water. It dripped onto the ground bit by bit and was absorbed by the soil. Saint blood contained boundless energy. If an ordinary Wu Zun realm cultivator were to obtain it, even if they couldn't increase their strength, they could still devour it to unleash a great deal of power. But now, all of it had fallen to the ground and turned into useless trash. Medicine God Sek's sect master was dumbfounded. Medicine God Sek's disciples were in a daze. Countless experts who were watching from afar, waiting for the outcome of this battle, were thoroughly shocked. A saint had fallen. How many years had it been since a saint had fallen in the Eastern Divine Prefecture, or even the profound Sky Great Realm? Even when treasures were born, aristocratic families fought, and factions clashed, there had never been a saint who had fallen. After all, saints were second only to great saints and Elysian emperors. Elysian emperors lived in seclusion, and great saints didn't appear. Saints were the strongest in the world. The strongest were practically the representatives of immortality. But now a saint had died. His primordial spirit had been destroyed by Tianyang, completely reduced to ashes. How could this be? Some experts from the other factions of the Eastern Divine Prefecture were in disbelief. In their opinion, the Medicine God Sek's rise was inevitable now that the Medicine God Sek's patriarch had awakened. Attacking the immortality realm cultivators in the distant Eastern Profound and Eastern Sea continents, the Medicine God Sect, and the unknown Zhongbei city was just a way for the Medicine God Sect to establish their might. No one would have thought that these three factions would resist in the slightest. However, the Medicine God Sect's patriarch had exploded into a bloody mist. What remained of his flesh fell to the ground before their eyes. The bloody truth was enough to shatter their hearts into pieces. If the Medicine God Sect's patriarch is dead, doesn't that mean the other saints might be dead as well? At this time, a disciple from a saint's sect revealed a trace of fear. The Medicine God Sect's patriarch's ferocious name had shaken the entire Eastern Divine Prefecture tens of thousands of years ago. Even Banten's Embark then was suppressed by the Medicine God Sect. Even though the Medicine God Sect's patriarch had awakened from his slumber, his combat strength was far from his peak. Without a doubt, he had the battle prowess of a sage. If a sage died, wouldn't the other sage sects be at risk of being killed as well? Instantly, countless disciples of the sage sects felt their scalps go numb. Many sage sects were strong because of the word sage. If a saint were to die, then the entire sect would fall apart. They didn't know the name of the person who killed the ancestor. If it was a murderer, then they would be in great danger. Suddenly, countless spectators fled, and the news spread like a storm, sweeping through the entire Eastern Divine continent in just a few days. Of course, that was a matter of a few days. At the center of the Medicine God Sect's small world, Tianyang casually grabbed at the air, and the power of the saint's primordial spirit dissipated in the air. Tianyang wasn't interested in the ancestor's origin energy, but he wouldn't be able to forgive himself if he wasted it. It's said that the Medicine God Sect has many alchemy inheritances that even Banten Simun doesn't have. Now it's mine. Tianyang smiled faintly, the flames of destruction burning fiercely. Tianyang had refined the flames of destruction for many years, so Tianyang could use them as easily as an extension of his arm. In the blink of an eye, the true flames of destruction turned into a small bottle. Heavenly Sun casually placed the Medicine God Sect patriarch into the small flaming bottle. Why you? You gone too far. The Medicine God Sect master, who was still immersed in disbelief, almost exploded when he saw Tianyang treat the ancestor's remnant soul like trash. He glared at Tianyang with eyes full of fury. You want to fight? A peak half-saint? Tianyang glanced sideways at the Medicine God Sect master and sneered. He'd said long ago that he would destroy the Medicine God Sect. Now that he'd killed the Medicine God Sect's ancestor, destroying the sect was as easy as flipping his hand. If the Medicine God Sect's ancestor insisted on seeking death, Tianyang didn't mind speeding up the destruction of the sect. You, The medicine god sect master's face contorted. But Tianyang had killed a saint with a single slash. It was so terrifying that it was branded in his heart. He didn't dare to compete with the current Tianyang. Tisich, seeing this, Tianyang smiled disdainfully. He then looked down at the countless medicine god sect disciples who were trembling in fear. Honorable sect master, activate it. At this moment, an elder of the medicine god sect bellowed. Tianyang raised an eyebrow. In the next moment, Wu Zun, a ninth-stage medicine god sect elder, charged in front of him. Then he self-detonated. Honorable sect master, if you don't activate it now, the medicine god sect's 10,000 years of foundation will be completely gone. Boom! There was a loud explosion. Tianyang was stopped in his tracks when he turned around. However, the surface of Tianyang's body flickered with dragon power. Wu Zun's self-detonation didn't cause any damage to Tianyang's fledgling Dragon Emperor body. Honorable sect master, whether or not the medicine god sect survives depends on today. With a furious roar, another medicine god sect elder charged forward and self-detonated. Against someone who could kill a saint, these Wu Zun elders naturally couldn't use any conventional methods to stop Tianyang. They could only self-detonate. Your courage is commendable. Tianyang's lips curled. With a casual swipe, the terrifying light from the self-detonation disappeared as if it never existed. Honorable sect master. However, just as Tianyang erased the self-detonation, another medicine god sect elder charged forward and self-detonated. One after another, as if they weren't afraid of death, they formed brilliant sparks around Tianyang. Hearing this, the medicine god sect master's heart trembled. Then he gritted his teeth. All right. In the next moment, a cold green light flashed in the medicine god sect master's hand. Then he slashed his own neck with all his might. Rip! The medicine god sect master's neck instantly snapped. In the next moment, blood spurted out from his mouth. Strangely, it didn't splatter everywhere. Instead, it was uniformly dyed by the green light and sank into the ground beneath the medicine god sect master. In the next moment, the medicine god sect master's crazed roar could be heard. Ha ha! You're right. Medicine god sect's future depends on this moment. Don't think that you could destroy my medicine god sect just because you killed the venerable ancestor. The eyes of the medicine god sect master's head that had fallen off shone with a crazed light. In the next moment, Tianyang felt the ground tremble violently. Beams of green light shot out from the depths of the ground. If we're going to die, we're going to die together. Come out. Medicine Demon Goose Sage. Chapter 12:16. Medicine Demon Goose Saint. The medicine god sect master roared in a frenzy. In the next moment, huge cracks appeared on the ground. Each crack was thousands of meters long, and from the depths of the cracks, ghostly green light constantly shot out. Some of the medicine god sect disciples were confused. Medicine Demon Goose Saint? What was that? In the next instant, a ray of green light shot toward the medicine god sect's disciple. In the next moment, the medicine god sect disciple's body was dyed green. In the next moment, his eyes widened as his vitality was extinguished. Hiss! At this moment, the Peak Wu Zun and the other half-saints, who didn't have the backing of Sage Sect, were all trembling. Some of the half-saints who looked old were trembling as they looked at the terrifying aura under the green light in disbelief. It was as if there was something terrifying in the depths of the cracks that was about to awaken. Medicine Demon Gu Saint, Medicine Demon Gu Saint, Medicine God Sect, they still haven't killed the Medicine Demon Gu Saint. An old man spoke. His eyes were filled with fear. Hearing this, the younger Peak Wu Zun was confused. Medicine Demon Gu Saint? What's that? Do you know where the Medicine God Sect's minor world came from? The old man suddenly asked. The younger Wu Zun shook his head. Wasn't it created by the Medicine God Sect's patriarch himself? If the Medicine God Sect's patriarch could create such a powerful minor world, then the Eastern Divine Prefecture would have long been under the Medicine God Sect's rule. The old man smiled disdainfully. The origin of the Medicine God Sect's minor world has nothing to do with the Medicine God Sect's patriarch or the entire Medicine God Sect. The medicine god sect's minor world was originally created by the sect master of Banten, Simeon, more than 100,000 years ago to suppress a peerless demon. However, tens of thousands of years ago, the patriarch of the medicine god sect found this small world and suppressed that unparalleled demon. Furthermore, this small world has an incomparably abundant amount of spiritual energy. That's why the medicine god sect established their sect here. The old man said angrily. Hearing this, the young peak-level Wu Zun was startled, revealing a look of disbelief. The entire sect is built on the seal of a peerless devil? Isn't that courting death? That's right, courting death. However, no one thought that a saint would do something so stupid. We all thought that the ancestor was certain that the medicine god sect's minor world was safe and killed the sealed devil. That's why he dared to establish the medicine god sect here. But who would have thought that even after so many years, the medicine god sect still hasn't managed to kill the demon? Instead, the unparalleled demon has escaped. As he spoke, beams of green light abruptly shot out. It dyed the entire sky a terrifying dark green. That unparalleled demon is the medicine demon venomous insect saint who massacred half of the Eastern Divine Prefecture hundreds of thousands of years ago. The old man roared. At this moment, Wu Zun suddenly realized something. The old man's figure became fainter and fainter until he finally disappeared. The moment the old man opened his mouth, the old man had already started to flee. The unparalleled demon has appeared. The young peak-level Wu Zun was stunned. In the next moment, the ground suddenly trembled. Then there was a loud explosion. Boom! In the next moment, the ground of the medicine god sect's minor world was completely shattered. A huge ball of green light suddenly blasted out from the depths of the earth. Above it, runic shackles firmly locked him in place. However, at this moment, the dark green blood of the medicine god sect's sect master suddenly bloomed with light. It blasted into the runic shackles. Boom! The runic shackles had been tempered by the endless years and were extremely old. In fact, they were even damaged. Now, the medicine god sect master was risking his life to attack them. Naturally, they shattered. How many years has it been? A green mist was suddenly released, shrouding the entire medicine god sect's minor world. The medicine demon goose saint, was suppressed in this broken place by the bastards of Banten Simeon. How many years have I been suppressed in this broken place? A cold voice sounded. It was as if there was no emotion in it. Everyone heard it. Hearing this, the hearts of countless cultivators trembled. It was as if something had struck their hearts hard. Speak. How many years has it been? A figure gradually appeared in the green light. In the next moment, a terrifying gaze suddenly pierced through the thick mist and landed on an elder of the medicine god sect. The elder of the medicine god sect was stunned. He looked at the terrifying figure in the green light and trembled all over. He fell to the ground. I don't know. You don't know? Hearing this, the green figure clearly couldn't accept it. In the next moment, a terrifying green light bloomed. Then go to hell. There was no loud sound. There was no movement at all. Countless peak-level Wu Zun who didn't manage to escape in time widened their eyes and looked at the elder of the medicine god sect. It seemed like nothing had happened. At this moment, the elder of the medicine god sect suddenly let out an incomparably shrill scream. In the next moment, his entire body fell to the ground, completely dead. Not even a fragment of his primordial spirit was left. Then, small holes appeared on the elder's body. Then, terrifying red-black worms crawled out of them. The 48,000 pores on his body were filled with these tiny bugs. Countless of them crawled out of the elder's body. In the blink of an eye, the medicine god sect elder's corpse was occupied by the red and black bug. Then, it was devoured and turned into an incomplete skeleton. This, in an instant, countless people were terrified. They felt a chill from the depths of their hearts. The elder of the medicine god sect was a peak martial, exalted level cultivator. Yet at some point in time, such a terrifying bug had appeared in his body. He couldn't fight back at all and was devoured by the worms. A little bit. Seeing this, Tianyang raised his eyebrows and revealed a faint smile. Goo worms. In the next moment, the undying fire and the true flames of destruction burned on Tianyang's body. What a hateful aura! At this moment, the green figure raised his head and looked at Tianyang. A trace of fear and disgust appeared in the depths of his eyes. Then you should die. Then, the green figure raised his palm at Tianyang. In the next moment, he clenched his fist. A terrifying green explosion exploded around Tianyang's body. Countless worm eggs exploded, and Tianyang's body was surrounded by countless poisonous creatures. That's it. At this moment, a black flame burned. Everything around him was burned to ashes. This sort of mind can kill more than just saints.